I just saw the tiniest dog head in your frame, Malin.
Yeah, so cute.
Hello, and welcome to another. I forget what I call these. Writers conversation, crafty chats, writers chat, crafty conversation, something like that. We're going to talk about craft books.
It's above you. It says writers chat. That's what you wrote.
This is why you should be in charge, Malin, and not I. But yeah, writers chat about today Anatomy of Prose by Sacha Black. Got with me two of the most anatomiest of women I know, the best prose gals out there, Malin and Laura. Hello, welcome.
Hello.
How are we doing?
I'm absolutely not the best prose gal ever whatsoever, which is why I needed this book.
Just take it, Malin. Just yes, and
so I was the perfect student because I needed to learn. So.
Yeah, I was basically like, which book can I rope Malin into reading with me for July? And it was this. And then Laura's like, I love this book. And I'm like, you should join us. And so you did. Hello. What are we working on? Did you work on something during this?
I did not work on anything while I was reading it, because basically I read it during the first half of the month. I was done pretty quickly. I kind of wanted to just go through everything and then decide on what was useful for me depending on what I was working on. And recently I've been working on, like completely separate from that, I've been working on rewriting some of the first chapters of The Art of Summoning Demons, because I feel like they're not hitting the mark when I'm trying to query them. And as I was changing some scenes, putting some scenes together, moving things around, I felt like I had learned a lot from this book, and like some small bits here and there were vastly improving just from that new knowledge that was in my brain. So
I love that for you. Laura, because you read this, because you said you loved it, and you said this is what kickstarted your writing, and your writing I'm absolutely obsessed with. So how did you read it, and how did you find it applicable to your own writing? We're going to get into this later on, but I just want to touch on it now. Give a little foreshadowing, if you will.
So I had written my YA sci-fi back in 2018. And then I was watching iWriterly, and she had an interview with Sacha Black where she went over the 5 senses. And I was like, shoot dang, I suck. I got this book, and it changed my life.
Yeah, it's very, I feel like out of all the craft books we read, maybe except for Save the Cat, this is very hands-on.
I love a hands-on craft book.
Less, because a lot of the stuff we've read, I've read, and partly you, Malin, has been like conceptual stuff.
Yeah.
I feel like, the everlasting, what's that Lisa Crum book called? I forget.
Story Genius,
like it's all just concept.
I fall asleep every time I try and read that one.
I mean, I think, honest to God, gun to head, if it wasn't for the fact that we were doing a chat on it, I probably wouldn't have finished it either.
Well, I have the audio book.
Which is a shame, because I did enjoy some parts of it, but the overall book was not for me. Some bits of it were for me. It's almost like I wanted to read articles from the author and pick and choose the ones.
It was very blog post friendly, but we're not here to talk about Lisa Crum. We're here to talk about The Anatomy of Prose by Sacha Black. Sacha Black is a English author. Yeah. She's written some series, a lot of craft books. She has books on crafting.
I think she's been promoting a lot her vampire lesbian romances recently on Instagram. Mm-hmm. So that's the stuff she's been writing, yeah.
She also has a YA series out that's pretty popular. I've seen it around at least a lot. And also this one, Anatomy of Prose, together with a book about crafting heroes and crafting villains.
And she's got like a podcast thingy as well, right?
She also has a podcast, the Rebel Author podcast, which has 270 something episodes, I think.
She is active in the community.
She also has another one about writing a bestseller.
And she's got
Oh.
one. I got the one on villains, on writing villains, because I struggled with that at the beginning. My villains are very flat. I find they're very like bad, evil, and that's it. So,
I mean, that's just bad people, though. That's also my villain, so maybe I should pick that up next. But yeah, and then she also writes fiction under a secret pen name, which I was very intrigued by because she didn't want to say. But I guess you keep your secrets. A little bit about the author, and I think the way I've done it today is that I've just made like little bullet points for each step. It's 12 steps to sensational prose. Is the subtitle of the book, and then I would just cherry pick some conversations that I want to talk about. If you two want to talk about something else, in particular, how you kind of relate that to your writing, because that's always something I'm interested in hearing about craft books, is how to actually apply it. Then that'd be amazing. We're going to say hi to some people before we dive in. We're going to say hi to Kaiko. Hello, hello. Cowboy Hat Wave. Hello to Anna and Christian and JC and Regina. Regina says, I haven't read the book in years, but I'm here to listen and enjoy. Always welcome, Regina. Always welcome. She also has a YouTube channel, and I've seen quite a lot of interviews, both with her and that she's done with other authors, especially her podcast. I feel like I've pretty much any author that you've heard of on YouTube has been through the Rebel Author podcast, I feel like, at some point.
yeah, she's really good at getting them. I like.
Yeah.
She's built quite a good reputation, I think.
You know how like Chicken Shop Date is like now a staple on the promotion tour for like a film?
I watched I mean, Ryan Reynolds and
that's pretty big.
Man.
But like I feel like the Rebel Author podcast is like a staple on like a book tour of an author.
It's the equivalent to our small author community.
Yeah, she's our chicken shop for sure. And I'm not mad about it. The same way there's this tangent. There's this, I don't know if they're related, friends, something, but they're two friends / relatives on Instagram that's like fake background singing to like bops.
Yes.
And they're like increasingly getting more and more famous people to just
they got invited on there like to do the actual and they don't have a mic on there every single time.
Nope, it's so funny. But I feel like that's the same vein, like it's now a staple for an artist to do like a collab video with these two backup singers. They're not backup singers. I think one is a comedian and the other one, I have no idea. Wait, is she also a comedian? Because she keeps knitting and talking about stuff. I think that's the lady. Anyway, tangent. But I think, the Rebel Author podcast is in the same vein as that. Wendy is here. Hello, 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 hello. I think first stop is just the concept, 12 steps to sensational sentences. Any thoughts on like the layout of the book? Because I have thoughts in terms of formatting.
Any thoughts I have, just to preface this, is going to be 15 days old. So I've forgotten a few things. I basically read it the first half of the month and then I've been super busy and I kind of probably forgot a few things. But I think I liked that it was structured, that it felt like very... here's one step, here's some examples in it, and then here's an exercise based off that step. So I like the general structure, but there were some that I was just a bit, that's random, I'm not interested in that. So it was on and off. It was a little...
Laura?
I loved it, but one thing that threw me for a loop the first time I read it is she is very irreverent in this book. So if that is a turnoff for you, this may not be the writing craft book for you.
It's usually not a turnoff for me, but it was so much of it. It was so much. And I'm like, this book could have been cut in half by cutting like the character stuff. Like the way she talks and the way she describes and like the way she uses humor. Because as we all know, you can't have a writing book with no humor in it. You gotta have jokes. She has a lot of jokes.
I do enjoy that you can see her personality through it, and that it's like not as I think that's why a lot of authors who write craft books do it that way, is because otherwise it's very flat and a little bit boring and you end up falling asleep like Story Genius, or I don't know. But it's you can see her personality shine through. But I do feel like sometimes it's almost like a gimmick, like a comedian who does the same joke again and again and again, and you're like, all right, we get it. You can skip that part. Just give me
100% that. I also thought the contents page, 5 pages long, that was too long for me. When I opened up the book, I was like, oh God. And also it's not printed in a straight line. It's just, it's skewed in my novel, which also grated me. But it was very long content pages. I do agree. I think the steps work well. Also love that there's a summary at the end of each step. So as you read through it, because there's a lot of like headings and subheadings and subtitles and like quotes and stuff. So when you get to the end of a chapter or a step, you can be like, okay, what does she actually want me to learn from this section? And then you read a summary, and that was really helpful to me, at least.
She also has bolded parts of sentences throughout the sections that will help you be like refocus and be like, okay.
Yeah, I find some of them confusing though, because she would bold some points and not bold some points, and I was like, okay, so is this point not important? Or there was particularly one about juxtaposition and then some other literary device. Like she had bolded one of them but not the other one, but then she's like, they're equally important. I was just, I don't know, the formatting could have been better for me. But I also think this might be the thickest craft book I've read in terms of, I don't know if it's just because the print seems big, but it's also very long.
I'm just looking at I've got like a little bottom shelf where I have all the craft books. I'm just checking the thickness of them.
At least of the ones I have.
The book is thick, but the chapters are tiny. The subsections.
Yeah, it was very enjoyable to be like, right, I'm done with this chapter, and just there's something more satisfying about it. So you feel like you're moving forward a little bit faster. And
I also loved how
they sort of
build.
Sorry.
Yeah, I also loved how they build on each other. Like the first thing you learn is like learning how to actually like write, and then you're learning how to learn. And then she builds on all her steps. So when you're on like step 11 and 12, you have like the solid foundation of the rest of the chapters. I will say though, her chapter headings in terms very jokey and very like colloquial. I didn't always understand what the chapter was about based on the titles. So when I was making notes, I would have to like make notes like, this chapter is about show versus tell, because it wasn't necessarily evident from the chapter title, as we will see later. Let's see. Keiko says that YouTube struggles. Is it me Jesus or is it Keiko?
It's happened before that. It's Keiko, so I don't know. But
okay. Not to point any fingers.
I've heard bad things about the internet in Germany in general from like Anne always struggles. Keiko always struggles. True. I'm just saying there must be a cap on there.
There's a pattern.
Yeah, maybe the Wi-Fi is blowing out the window or something. I don't know.
Can anyone else call in and confirm? Is it YouTube? Is it us? Is it StreamYard? Is it you guys?
Is it serviceable? Please call in. There's a reply. Oh, on my end, Keiko says.
Sorry, Keiko. I do feel like there's bad internet out there.
Yep. So that's one of the gripes I had. Is like the titles of the chapters, and then like there's subtitles, and then there's subchapters, and it's just very, very much to keep track of. But it'll make it easier to look up whatever you're wondering, I guess, in the future. Because I feel like this is one of those craft books like Save the Cat, where you can like, oh, what did she say about show versus tell again? You can just look up the concepts and you can find exactly what you're looking for. So that's nice.
And I feel like my brain did that without me prompting it to. Like I have forgotten huge bits of this book and I've just only remembered some more important bits that were at the time something I needed. Very selective memory for this book.
Yeah, which kind of works out, I feel like, because it's so divided into its like niche content. So it's easy to find whatever you're looking for when you're looking at the contents. One of the things that she speaks fairly early on about is the concept of gestaltism. Was this something that any of you had heard about or known about before this?
Yes,
but is this a common thing?
I've heard of it, but like in university courses, it's just the idea that, you know, like the sum of several items equals something bigger. I'm explaining it in extremely vulgar terms, but you get what I mean.
No, that's definitely how I interpret it, is because we have something, because this, what I was mostly confused about was that in nursing, there's this concept of like holistic nursing. So like the patient is more than the sum of its parts.
Yeah.
Meaning that a patient is more than like their diagnosis and their limbs and their body. And like, as you say, the sum of all the parts adds up to something bigger. And she talks about how you can see that on a novel level and a sentence level and even on a word level. And that was something I really struggled with, kind of.
I
She
feel like
mentioned it one in
if
the
I'm honest,
beginning and one in the end, and then never mentioned it again.
I didn't think she explained it all that well, to be honest. Like, I feel like she adapted, like, she definitely used the concept, but she didn't explain the concept all that well at the beginning, sort of almost assuming everyone who's reading this book knows what gestaltism is. And it's like, no, we might not. We don't all have the same education, you know, we don't all have
Yeah, I'm
courses.
just a dumb boy, so I had no clue
Like,
at the
talk to
concept
us
of
like we're
Catholicism.
dum-dums.
Yeah, so that's like the one thing that I kind of struggled to understand during this novel. Anything else you want to add in the introduction before we go into the individual steps? Or
I do like that she says who this book is not for. I kind of enjoyed the, you know, the little list of like, if you're looking for this, if you're looking for that, this isn't it, so that you're clear before you start.
Yeah.
yeah,
One thing that I thought was awesome was in the flip cover on the dust jacket. It has like, this is what you will learn. And I was like, surely you can't do all that. And then I read the book and I was like, dang it, it does all that. Like, holy
No.
I
cow.
have mine on the back though, Molly.
We don't have the same edition. Oh, it's at the back. Okay. It's like,
My
Yeah.
back
Where is
is just praise for it.
Is that a hardback or?
Yeah.
what the hell?
Oh,
There's
she
hardback?
bougie. She
Yeah.
bougie like that. But yeah, no, she did a very good job of defining who this book or what this book is and who it's for, and especially who it's not for.
Yeah.
JC says, "Lol." Mullen is like, "Talk to me like I'm 5."
Yes.
Literally.
This edition is 4 years old.
Oh dang! I've had mine since forever. Okay.
Yeah,
When
I've
did
had
it?
mine for a while.
It came out 2020.
Oh, I've had mine since 2020 because I think I bought this when it published.
Mine is
It
May
took me-
2020.
Took me 4 years to read it.
Yeah. Same.
But yeah, overall, I think, it was a very strong beginning. She makes a good job of establishing what this book is and what it isn't. And it's a book for anyone who wants to learn about writing, but it's not a book for people looking to be told what to do. And she does make a good point of like underlining the point that she's not here to tell anyone how to do. She's firmly believing that rules are there to be broken.
Hence the Rebel Author podcast.
Hence the Rebel Author podcast. And then she goes along in a few instances and she's like, this is how you do it. And I'm like, you're not taking your own advice here, man. But that's just every craft book, though. It's hard to write a craft book without being like, this is how you should do it.
I feel like it would
This
take
is how you do it.
even more pages for them to be like, just so you know, this is not super prescriptive. You don't have to do it exactly like this. And she does kind of say this in some instances. There's some passages where she goes like, some rules are meant to be broken, like I like to do it that way. You don't have to do it that way. It's my personal preference, which fair enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And near the beginning, she says that nothing is sacred in writing, like not even the full stop, the period, because there's a book where it's all one sentence and it's hundreds of pages long. Like it can be done.
It won some award as well, right? Like it's like
like
Oh, that was awful
nothing
to
is sacred in writing. It's just what help you find your style and
yeah.
your own
If
author
anything,
voice.
it feels like she's saying play around. Here's some stuff to help you play around, but just play around.
For sure, that's the vibe she's given off in the introduction. We go into the steps now. I thought we could cover like 6-ish steps, see how far we get, and then do a little sprint, and then do the last 6 steps, and the roundup at the end. The first step she talks about is step number 1 is learning how to sing, and this is the chapter where she's kind of like speaks about voice, his sing voice. And this is like what I mean when I tell you that I don't always understand what the chapter is about. Because this is like learning how to sing, like Ariel, hello. But then it's about the like author voice versus character voice, which I thought it was a very interesting discussion. Because she says that the characters have a voice and then you as an author have a voice. And it's not always like your voice who should be shining through. It's the character voice. And that's something I feel like Laura does really well in her writing. Is character voice. So
yeah.
So this chapter was amazing. One of the exercises was to write down your sentences and stuff and analyze them and see what you like. And so I have my style Bible notebook.
Oh,
God, I love that.
how'd you get the printing on? Is that just stickers?
It's vinyl stickers that I got off Etsy.
That's
Oh.
great.
So in the front is my like anatomy of prose notes that I took.
Oh, that's cool.
Nice.
But then in the back, I wrote down sentences. So I wrote down some of my own writing that I then analyzed, and I wrote down other sentences that I super love that I would like to be able to emulate or just steal certain things like punctuation from. So
What's
yeah.
your fave line that you wrote down? Can you share? Do you want to share? No pressure if you.
One of my favorite lines is actually from American Gods, and it's in this book, so I stole it from this book. And it's, the house smelled musty and damp and a little bit sweet, as if it were haunted by the ghosts of long days. And I was like, ah, it's beautiful.
That's
like,
pretty.
If I love that the examples she gives are very short and they get to the point very quickly, and sometimes you're like, wow, this did so much in how many words, and you have a huge impression of something in just a very short sentence.
Yeah. So I have Neil Gaiman in here. I have William Joyce. I have Melissa Albert, Philip Ardaugh, Jessica Ann York, S.T. Gibson, Alexis Henderson. Like, I've got a bunch of different authors' sentences in here that I will read through and be like, okay, they use a semicolon here. I never use semicolons. I need to figure out how to properly use semicolons so that my sentences have this better flow in this specific context. So it's been helpful.
Do you want to share one of your own favorite sentences from your own writing that you did for this exercise?
So these are older. So these are from May 2020. But these are, so I would be on Jules Donnelly Writer's live streams and Charlie Dorset's live streams and stuff. And we came up with this concept of fried brain town for an author tube, like location, made up location. And so this is what I wrote in the chats, and then I copied it down into here. It said, the saloon of Fried Braintown serves liquid despair on tap with a side of writer slice shaved right off the block. Scrambled eggs with melted ideas are the house special. The clocks are whack too. The horses are all nightmares and daydream stallions. They cannot walk in a straight line but meander in stray paths. No one knows who founded Fried Braintown, but legend says if you stay for a long enough period of time, you will be raptured to productivity land. That may be a legend, though. So, like,
very evocative.
So, like, I took my YouTube comments and put them in here, and then analyzed those to figure out what is it that I like to do, and then incorporate some of the stuff that I've learned.
Oh, that's fun. It's very like a practical approach to writing, I feel like. Or intentional, rather.
I'm
I
feel like
at like intentional learning.
At the beginning of reading this book the very first time in 2020, before I gave up and stopped and then reread it later now, I did something similar, but it is empty. It's literally just like after I'd read a book, I'd be like, because I do appreciate her advice of like read like a writer, and I think it comes up in a later chapter maybe, but you know, where she's like, be conscious of sentences you really love and try to pay attention to those so you can figure out your own style and your own voice. And I feel like I wrote down a list of some books where I was like, I really liked this result, but then I didn't have the exact sentences, and I was like, find later the sentences that made this result happen. So kudos me, nice job.
Yeah, she speaks, at least in the first step, like mostly about author voice versus character voice and what kind of makes up your voice. And that's something that's really interesting, especially I feel maybe for me and you, Malin, because we're just two dumb foreigners. So like how is our native language voice comparing to the English language voice?
Have you
Like-
ever written anything in your mother tongue, or have you never tried?
I have written stories. The first like full set of stories I wrote was for Nano 2010 or something. And I did write in Norwegian then, and it wasn't until I found like YouTube and the writing community that I switched to English, just because it's easier to share and get feedback. And also
Yeah.
for the market I want to like publish in, it makes sense to write in English, because so many people speak English, and then there's like a tiny fraction that speaks Norwegian. So it's just a game of numbers really for me. And I also like to just develop my English. But that's something I thought was really interesting, like how
It definitely must impact it, the way that, because to me, I came from writing in French to writing in English because I struggled to write how I wanted to in French. Like, it felt French, if anything, is a more literary language, and it feels like everything I wrote had this almost literary feeling, which I don't like. I don't read,
Are you on Team Police Report?
I really enjoy fiction that is more like action pace, straight to the point. Things happen, and same as my movies, same as my, like, it's everything I love is more like that. And
You're gonna love my novel then.
French is more poetic, just in the way you write the same sentence in English. It's gonna be more poetic, and I struggled so much because I was like, this is not my character, this is not my voice, and it doesn't work. And it's almost why I switched to English.
That's very fascinating. Do you feel like, I mean, obviously it would, but have you noticed in any way how your French influences how you write English? Except for just like syntax error and stuff like that, but
syntax errors. I sometimes struggle to find the right expression or idiom in English, and I almost make it up from French because I'm like, this is a great expression. It describes exactly what I want, and it doesn't exist in English. So I need to find an almost direct translation to make it work.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the big ones where I'm like, ooh, I have this Norwegian word that's like the perfect nuance of the thing I want to convey, but I don't know the English equivalent, or if there's an English equal to it. And that's incredibly frustrating. But that, as you say, like that makes me, I feel like, be more creative in my language and maybe use words that you wouldn't traditionally use.
I feel like it gives us a slight advantage in terms of when she talks about cliches. I almost feel like we might not have the same cliches as someone who has spent their whole life reading in the same language, and we might have different cliches that might not, they might be innovative, so it's fine.
Yeah, we might be the Shakespeare of a novel. Who knows?
Yeah.
But some of the things you talk about making up your voice is the choice of verbs and adjectives, the pattern of punctuation and grammar, use or not of adverbs, length of sentence, the size of your cast of characters, point of view, and some like things that I've never like thought about, like how much prose, like descriptive prose we write contra how little. Like, I don't know, because you said English is a very like florally and romantic language. Norwegian is very like bare to the bones, minimal. Like, so like those things will influence our author voice. And then Laura, I mean, you're not American, but you're Canadian, so I think culturally they're
I'm both.
pretty similar.
Are you both? I thought you were just Canadian.
No,
sorry, I just discovered new lore about Laura.
Born and raised in San Diego, California.
I did know that you had dual citizenship. Is that what it's called? So that makes sense.
I've just been in Canada for the last 8 years.
In my head, I thought Americans never let anyone have dual citizenship, and they were like, "No, you have to renounce everything."
Freedom forever.
Yeah. So like obviously Laura would have a different approach to like her voice because she's
I have a couple examples real quick. I can just read like a paragraph of each if you want to see how I switch my prose voice for different types of stories.
I would love.
So window. Down. Okay, so this is how I went about doing my middle grade. So
can we get this? There you go.
Okay. So chapter 1 is bang. The sound startled Jimmy so badly his pencil ripped across the page of his carefully drawn comic frame. The shading of the long, sharp teeth of the monster was ruined. "What the heck was that?" he called out, but his friends, Jade, Chloe, and Gabriella, were immersed in the zombie battle going on in the video game. The screams of the undead were absorbed by all the foam and felt sports banners and football jerseys hung up on the wall. They allowed Jaden to crank the sound without disturbing his parents. Let the zombies scream and carnage be truly terrifying. So, like, this is...
Can I just ask if this was on purpose, that there's this beautiful alliteration with foam, felt, and football jerseys?
I don't think that one was on purpose.
It is scratch an itch I didn't know I had.
So, this one is for like almost a teenager. So, I could bring it back a bit more for a little bit younger if I wanted to, because it is middle grade. But I like to think of Jimmy as a little bit more mature, even though he has a Batman glow-in-the-dark watch and everything. But so that's my voice for my middle grade. But then my voice for my adult dark academia, instead, it sounds more like this.
Is voice something you actively work with in like drafting mode?
Yeah. I can't fast draft. I have to think about every word.
I'm just...
I have to think of every word of every sentence before I write the first iteration down. I can't do it super fast.
Dang.
So this is snow fluttered like fallen moonlit angels upon the towering steeple dome roof of St. Benedict School of Spiritual Studies. The main building was a single cylindrical structure rising to pierce the pregnant clouds. Flakes that succumbed to their damnation piled around my booted feet as I stood at the edge of the dirt road Abbey Lane, newly arrived at Whitby, England. The handle of my heavy suitcase creaked in my leathered grip. Tomes of inherited ancient knowledge weighed me down physically, yet lifted my soul with the hopes of revenge, and salvation. So
it's beautiful.
It's very different. Pregnant clouds, hated it in a good way.
So this one is much more floral, much more purple prose, but it's a dark academia and it's going to be full of religious symbolism and stuff.
I also feel like the first sentences immediately tell you what it is. Like, you're doing a fantastic job of being like, here's what you're reading based on the type of language I'm using.
I think there's no doubt that you're reading dark academia based on that.
Literally.
Yeah.
So
well
done.
Yeah.
But how do you go about finding the voice of like this particular project, like the middle grade versus the dark academia? Is that just something that just bubbles out of your brain, or do you sit down like, okay, these are the words I'm going to use because this is dark academia. These are the words I'm going to use because this is middle grade. Like, is that something you...
I'll read in the genre first. And for Seeds of Doubt, I actually wrote my first draft and then was trying to find comp titles for my query letter. And I read my comp titles and I was like, they're so much better than mine. So then
this sounds nothing like I've written.
So then I analyzed, like, okay, these are the type of descriptions of like the spider leg eyelashes of this one lady in the Stitchers. And I was like, that is genius. Like, I need to be more spooky with my descriptions and just the way that the characters talk to each other and how far they went into the gore. Like, there's a chainsaw in one scene, but it's bloodless because it's an undead body. And I was like, what is this? Holy cow. And so just analyzing what I liked, what stood out to me. Like, I liked the prose in the Stitchers more than I liked in the Ghost Horse one that I read. So I leaned more towards that comp title. And then I rewrote my draft.
When did you decide on the comp titles? At which stage? Was it when you knew what the story was going to be about, but you hadn't completely written it? Were you like, I'm going to read first these books? Or like how? Because most people find their comp titles at the very end when they're like, fuck, what does this look like?
I know! So that's what I did for Seeds of Doubt was, oh my gosh, I don't know any comp titles. I haven't read too many with this kind of like Little Shop of Horrors bent in it, except for Goosebumps Day Out of the Basement, and you're told don't comp to old big name classics. So I was like, ah. So I literally called the librarian at the library in Toronto. I was like, hey, what do you got? And she gave me a couple of book titles. And so I went through and looked them up, and then I read them. And I was like, my writing is not up to snuff. And then I redrafted.
That librarian.
I know. So that's what I did for that. But for my Gothic ones, I am reading first and then doing this. So I've done it both ways now, basically.
And which one do you just know? This just turns into an interview of me and Marlon picking Laura's brain for writing.
Also, wearing a black t-shirt, and we just were like, so Laura, tell us.
But like, yeah, what came first? Like, what do you prefer? Like, how does it differ?
I like reading first. It's a lot less painful of a process of like you don't. It helps you think of certain like literary tropes of like, okay, like this type of alliteration, this many types of different allusions to Shakespeare, or like how in depth do I like the amount of poetry on the page versus I'm just studying poetry glazed over in the text. So like I read An Education in Malice by S.T. Gibson. And I was like, okay, I like the Dark Academia. I wish it was a little bit more purple prosy, and I wish there was more poetry on the page. And so now that I'm attempting this one, it's like, okay, I'm going to need more of my fake religious text I'm going to write on the page on how to do this exorcism. And so I'm going to need to write out the full text so that I can intersperse chunks of it. And I want it to be more purple prosy. Therefore, my stuff is more purple prose for this because it's a little bit more like, I think it's a lesson in vengeance and If We Were Villains, the Shakespeare one. I was like, my brain is not that Shakespeare, so
I've not read it,
slog.
but I've read the one everyone compares it to, which is the Donna Tartt one. But I've not read If We Were Villains, and apparently they're the same book. So I'm like, cool. I've read one. I've read both.
Yeah, so I actually didn't read the whole thing. I actually just pulled up the look at view in Amazon. So I read the first couple pages to get the drift before I
might attempt your method of reading first comp titles before going into, writing an idea, just because the next idea that I want to write into is more pure fantasy, which I've never written and I don't read enough of. So in my head, when I was thinking about doing that, I was already like, I need to read more of this before I get into it. So I might actually do this method of like read first, write later.
So I had my plot, my bullet points first, and my little backstories, and then I read in the genre. So I still had my original kernels, so I wasn't completely stealing every single idea from what I was reading. But it helped.
Well, thank you so much for that answer, and that kind of also covered point number 2, which is learning to learn, in which she talks about taking books and reading as a reader versus reading as a writer.
Yes.
Because I'm very much criminal offense to this one. I read as a reader. I just like open the page, read it, and then shoop, out it goes.
There's this one I read as a reader first, and then I read it again as a writer, taking notes and.
But she has an exercise book that I was thinking, if I'm going to reread it, I might just do the exercise book only, like the specific exercise one, and just try to do them instead of rereading the whole thing.
The workbook, you mean?
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. I was all thinking about doing the workbook, and I got three weeks of work now, so I'm like, should I just do the workbook? But yeah, in Learning to Learn, she talks about reading as a reader versus reading as a writer. Kind of like what Laura said, gathering sentences, analyzing what do I like, what don't I like what do I miss, what do I want more of. And she there's 5 tips I think she had, to actually physically doing it, like Laura do, write them down and then look at semicolons. I love semicolons. I have no idea what to do with them, so let me just learn about them. She also talked about reading a lot, collecting a lot, reading more than just books, read poetry, stuff like that to get inspired. And then she has some control questions that you can ask yourself. Like, how did the author create this effect? How does this juxtaposition work? And just like being very, as Laura is, a very active reader. And I think that's something I'm definitely going to do going forward. I'm in the midst of one of my favorite books, which is The Bone Season, enjoying it so much. And I'm just taking notes of sentences I like how she conveys emotion.
That's a good point, is when you're doing a reread of a favorite, it's a great idea to be like, try and read it as a writer this time around and take notes. Yeah.
So that's definitely something
where having a physical book or an ebook helps versus audio, because you can see the punctuation.
Yeah.
Well, I'm not huge on audiobooks. I listen to some light literature, not light literature, but like I listen to more like, never mind, that's not important too. But yeah, I'm definitely more a physical book reader. And he just talks about what to look for, like dialogue, description, characterization, technical observation, sentence level observation, and just examining them.
When there's some authors that when I read, I end up reading like a writer and not like a reader, just because it's like, I have a specific example in mind, which is Jeff Vandermeer, who wrote Annihilation, which is a movie.
Love the cover.
And he also wrote this book, Born. And when I read his books, the vastness of his vocabulary knowledge just impresses me every single time. And I stop and write down a vocabulary word that he's used every time, because I'm like, I need to use this somewhere. This is beautiful. This is brilliant. And it's like not too excessively floral for me. So it's like the level that I enjoy. And I think that's why it hits the mark whenever I read him specifically.
Yeah. One of the exercises I really liked was take a opening first sentence and rewrite it in your voice. And so one of the ones that I wrote was from An Education in Malice, which was, Massachusetts greeted me with a riot of autumn color. And I rewrote it to, murdered leaves of red mixed with caution yellow crunched under my Mary Janes as I took my first steps into Massachusetts. So it's like
so much more floral and evocative.
I know. That's what I like though. So it's like,
my problem would be like, I don't even know what my voice is. So like, what do I rewrite it to?
Well, I guess the point of learning to learn is sort of like learn what you do enjoy when you're reading and then try to emulate that. But you gotta remember, we're like level however many in the gamification of like being a writer versus your whole life career. Compare yourself as a nurse and as a writer and be like, I've got this many years of experience, I've done this much studying, I've done all of this and this and this and that. So I'm this level. As a writer, I'm this level. And it's normal to take time to figure out your voice, you know?
That is such a good point. Very good point. Because I have like 20 years of healthcare behind me and just like, 3 years of writing? So it makes sense.
In a different language with different rules.
In a different language. Yeah, that is a fair point too. But as I've said many a time, I don't feel like if you can speak English, I don't think that counts as bilingual, but that's just me. I don't know if that's a hot take.
It's easy. It's what every movie and TV shows is in.
But I don't know. I don't know. I'm gonna go through some comments before we like too long behind. Yeah, it wasn't us. It was Keiko who had some lag. Let's see. Anna wants to start a Lines I Love journal. I do this to some extent when I used to do Goodreads, because I would pause and update my Goodreads like reading schedule if I found a line I love, and then I could just go back to the reading log and see.
Nice.
But I have stopped using Goodreads, so that does not happen anymore. But that's something you can do, to stop and write down lines you love. I do that with Goodreads, but I'm going to do this with the Bone Season 2 now. Keiko says, I never learned how to use a semicolon in school. I just go with what I read in other books. In what Word wants me to correct. I actually never learned punctuation in English. Yeah, I'm the same. I just like, oh, okay, Word wants me to erase this comma. I guess they're right, which is usually my problem. Too many commas.
Same.
Wendy says, that's the kind of thing I try to start doing, but in the end, I always fail at keeping up on it. I mean, it's fair to just do it a bit and then enjoy the rest of the book, maybe. Do it for like Act 1. And then once you've done a couple of Act 1s, you can move on to Act 2s.
like I was reading The House of Hunger, and I was just reading it like a reader, but there were a couple sentences that pulled me, and I was like, okay, I gotta write this one down. And then I just swam back into the book.
I guess it's more beneficial to do a little bit than none at all. So yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Like flossing.
Keiko can, and Keiko does say, I can write more flowery, picturesque in English than in German. Well, that's fascinating.
That sort of makes sense, no? I feel like that's the idea everyone has of the German language, is sort of more functional.
Yeah, but I think there can be beauty in that sort of language, because Norwegian is also a very like functional language.
Flowery versus non-flowery does not mean beautiful to me, at least. Like they're separate statement, you know. I feel like functional can still be beautiful, but
I feel like functional would be really good in a thriller.
Yes, 100%.
Yeah. Laura is definitely an edit as you go person. LOL.
Yes.
I want to be that person, but I can't because I never finish. Well, I've never finished the book until I've never finished the book period in terms of writing it. So, but I just know that I would definitely never finish it if I ever stopped and edited as I go.
Some of them I haven't finished yet.
Laura's writing makes you look at your own writing and be like, damn, I need to step up my game. LOL. But then hearing about how Laura approaches writing, I'm like, okay, fair game. Fair game, Laura. Fair game. Anna says, I think it's so fun to put on a specific voice that's so different to my natural voice. It's like wearing a fun outfit.
I love that comparison. Yeah.
That is a very good comparison. This is also the kind of vibe I try to find myself in. Calling a librarian is such a pro move. My mind is blown. Instead of floundering by myself, let me just ask the person whose job it is to read books and keep on a somewhat recent database in their head.
So evident. It was right there in front of us the whole time.
We're joined by Sam. Hello. Loving this stream. JC says, and honestly, we should always be learning to make our writing better and stronger, no matter how long you've been a writer. Yeah.
100%.
Same Stig, if I edited this, I wouldn't finish the book ever. LOL. And I do enjoy the editing process, so kind of dangling in front of me as a carrot is a nice way to actually get me to get through things.
That is nice that you've got like that little reward for yourself after as well. Yeah.
See, making sentences pretty is why I write. That's what I love. So
yeah, but I don't know. Maybe we just work differently. That's it. Because I have a lot of shit to do after my draft, but you front load a lot of that work. So I think in the whole grand scheme of the process, we all have to do the same job.
It's like I might have some pretty sentences, but then there's a gaping plot hole, and it's like,
but it's pretty.
Exactly.
And now step 3, she talks about where we cock up in style, which is where the titles start to kind of disappear for me, because I'm like, what does this even mean?
She talks about filtering and all that. No?
Yes. She talks about repetition, crutch words, filtering, stuff like that.
Cliches.
This is an interesting one, because if anything, that's something I would look at the very end to clean up a manuscript, rather than like I wouldn't really from the start think be careful not to use cliches or filtering words. I'd be like, let me use them, and then when I'm cleaning up everything, oh my god, this is a cliche, delete, you know.
See, that's how my brain works though, is this way, is okay, her heart doesn't just fall. Her heart plummets through the floor and down 10 stories and crashes into a shallow grave at the bottom of the building. Like, let me get rid of cliches as I'm writing. I don't know. I can't do brackets and come back to this later. I have to do linear and as perfect as possible.
I write, and I'll even write the same line a couple of times in different spots in the chapter, knowing that I will have to go back and remove 1 and 2 of these. Like, I know that that's how I write, but if I took the time to stress over each word, I would literally never get anywhere, because I'm just that is something that I get so easily caught up in, is like the perfectionism. And I try and tell myself every day when I draft, it doesn't have to be good. It just has to be. It doesn't have to be good. It just have to be. But it's a very difficult lesson to learn for me, because I'm like Laura, all I want to do is just write pretty sentences.
Exactly.
But yeah, I mean, at least you finish manuscripts, so obviously this works for you.
I've finished like maybe half of my manuscripts, like
which is so many more than
a lot of people.
totality of ours.
But yeah, that's definitely something that I need to be mindful of. She also talks about, which I'm a criminal offense of, repeating scene openers, like starting with the same thing. I read through a draft once of my first ever story in English, which was the sci-fi book, and every every chapter started with my main character waking up. And it was just like, okay, I see what you mean here. Something's got to change.
As I was, reviewing some of the chapters in The Art of Summoning Demons, I was like, fucking hell, a lot of chapters end up on a character leaving and closing the door. And then and suddenly he's gone, and then the door closed, and I'm just like, I need to stop this.
Yeah.
close.
Which, tails back to the two previous ones, which talks about step number 1, like find your voice, and step number 2, like read as a reader, read as a writer. Like this kind of builds on top of that. And also she has this whole sandwich list of things to look for and words to look for and words to remove. Especially filtering is something I find so fascinating, because I see a lot of people, and by people I mean me, do this, where I filter my character's experience in the word. Like he sees, he hears, he smells, he thought. I do that so much, and it's really like...
It's a really hard piece of advice to put into practice, because as you learn, to write properly and something that's beautiful, on the one hand, you're like, okay, it has to be as direct as possible. However, you get contradicting advice, like when your character sees another character for the first time, it's great to describe it through the eyes of your character, so we know what they see first, what they smell first, what they, like all of these things. And it's like, but that's filtering, and it sort of feels almost contradictory.
Oh, I don't think that's not what I think of when I read that part. Because when she speaks about filtering, I think about emotional distance to the text. Like, I heard the door closed instead of the door closed. Like, you can still describe a character without saying, I saw her mauve hair with gray streaks as she bent down. You can just say, like, her nesty updo has gray streaks when she bends down, like stuff like that. But yeah, it's very hard to not, so hard to not filter.
What I loved with that is it brought to my awareness psychic distance, which is like how far the reader is from the character. Are you the character, or are you watching the character? How close are you? Are you omniscient and we're just up in the heavens watching this all play out? Or are you like third person close, where it's like, yeah, we're watching stuff happen? Or are like, is it, I heard a branch crack and it made me scared, versus like a branch crack sending shivers up my back, eyes were on me, something like that. So like, instead of watching them and having them state what they're feeling, we are like right next to the character, hearing it with those onomatopoeia words, or just cutting out the filtering part. And also like the follow through, like instead of using adjectives and stuff, like have it follow through and actually affect the character and make it, my brain just died. Yeah, like make it affect the character so that we can feel the effects too.
Yeah.
We can relate to the feeling of the effects.
I think it could be done sort of like, what I like to do is to start in a distance and then move in, or like start zoomed in and then move out. Because sometimes I like, you cut at an action and then you have the reaction to the scene in like the beginning paragraph of the following chapter. So I like to start close then and then move out. But I think I've seen a lot of times I will just like zigzag, zoom in and out all the time during a chapter. I think that's what I'm struggling most with, is choosing either to zoom out throughout the scene or zoom in and stay in. Like, I think going back and forth isn't something that really doesn't produce the effect that I want in my writing.
Yeah.
I learned that the hard way with description. Like, you can, not the hard way, but like in a description, you can be like, okay, this person is sitting in a house looking at the garden, and the main character walks in. You don't describe the person, the outside, the person, the window, the outside, the person, the window. You describe one, and then the next, and then the next, and then maybe circle back. Like you don't zigzag.
Yeah. I did this exercise with my writing because I just recently started a new draft of my cowboy story. And that's something I kind of tried to practice when I wrote the first chapter, was the descriptions, in terms of like, I usually like to start at the bottom and then go up in a scene in terms of like visually what you see. And there's like a canyon, and then you describe the ground, and then there's the wall, and then there's the sun in the heaven, and then the action starts. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was really like, it really made me conscious to how I was writing, which I feel like this book was very good at doing in general. It made me conscious and deliberate in my writing, which I think is a very good quality to have as a writer, because then you don't have to do all the back work.
Mm-hmm.
It's almost, I feel like a lot of these pieces of advice, like, you know, showing, not telling, and things like not using filtering words and everything, almost I take them in, I tend to edit with that new knowledge, but then in the next new draft of whatever I'm writing, I feel like I've progressed against that previous one, and I'm like doing it less. And as I edit that one, I'm like, oh, I have to do less edits based on that. And then as I go, because it's just not going to be, I can't write, you know, stopping every second for myself and being like, okay, am I filtering here? I have to continue writing as well. I have to like finish the draft first. But I do feel like it's integrating into my writing style more and more as I progress.
It's almost like the more we write, the better writers we become. I don't know.
Crazy.
Has anyone thought about that?
One of my favorite pieces of advice in there was with the show versus tell, is that sometimes telling is completely fine. Like if you showed every single thing, your novel would be a weapon, because it would be so long and just repetitive, and you don't have to show everything.
For sure. And we're going to touch on that later. First, we're going to say hi to Grape. Hello, 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 Grape. Glad I didn't miss this. Glad you didn't miss it too. Sam says, I don't think it's universally better to edit as you go or wait until the end. It's all about how your brain processes. Yeah. And like I said, we all have to do the same work, but Laura does all the work up front while me and Malin does all the work after. And that's just how my brain works.
It's about knowing what works best for us, really.
Yeah. We were also joined by a Kelly. Hello, hello, hello. Hey all, a bit late, but happy to listen to Yins while working on some art stuff. Okay.
It's a southern word.
Oh, yin? Is that like a y'all situation?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm learning new words every day.
Yeah. A lot of that advice is also circumstantial, like telling can be fun. Laura got it. Yeah. Laura got everything, which is why she's here.
Yes.
For sure. But yeah, this is definitely like when we start to get into the more listicle kind of things, because I feel like the first two chapters or the first two steps is very...
Sam, that confuses me more.
You wins. Yeah.
I'm
did not clarify anything for me. And over to the next step is going to be step number 4. Showed me the money, I mean story, which Laura touched on, which was show versus tell. When to show, when to tell, what to show, what to tell. As Laura said, you got to do both, because you can't have an entire novel with showing.
I literally, so super recently, a bunch of TikToks that speak specifically about the show versus tell, but it had nothing to do with, you know, writing fiction specifically. It was just a great example. And it was this woman talking about, have you heard of Ballerina Farms?
Yes. Oh, poor woman.
So Ballerina Farms, have you heard
I've seen the thumbnail. I haven't watched anything yet.
So just very, very briefly, Ballerina Farms is essentially this woman who, her dream was to be a ballerina in New York, but then she basically was seduced by this narcissist guy, from my understanding. I'm interpreting everything here, who was very, very, very wealthy and was like, my dream is for you to come with me, have all of my children, live on a farm, do everything from scratch, food and everything, all of that, never become a ballerina and not work and just stay there. And that's essentially what happened in her life. And they have a bunch of children, and they became famous through TikTok, I think, because of she does a lot of, everyone's made fun of her style of TikToks because they're very like, my husband wanted cereal this morning, so I went and collected the cereals from, like it's very, she does everything from scratch, right?
It's trad wife content. I think
Exactly, it's trad wife content. But there was an article that came out, and this interviewer, went to interview her specifically. I think her name is Hannah. I can't remember. And she was exemplified in this author TikTok who was like, this is a great example of show versus tell, because the way the article was written was showing us, not telling us, that this woman is potentially being emotionally abused. Because all of the showing was about, I ask her this question, the husband is right behind her and answers for her. It's all of these little elements of the article, and she never tells you, here's what I think is going on, this is bad, here's, my actual opinion. She just shows you through little scenes, little snippets of how controlling he's being of her. It's like, if I can find the TikTok, I'm going to put it on the Discord so you guys can see, because it's a great example of it.
Yeah. Yeah, devastating.
Sorry for the tangent.
No, it's fine. I love any tangent. But yeah, this is a chapter about show versus tell. And it starts with one of my favorite concepts, which is Chekhov's gun, and like the Chekhov gun quote, which is, don't tell me the moon is shining, show me the glint of light on broken glass, which I love. And also that I try to another thing I try to actively do in my writing. So I guess there's progress in some case. And then she goes on to talk about when telling is okay and when showing is okay. And action should be told mostly because you want it to be fast paced, while deep emotional stuff should be shown because, you want to connect to the character, stuff like that. And I think that's like a really, really good, sandwich list to go through when you're editing. Like, have I shown the things I want to show? Is my action going showy? Is it going telly? Do I need to do something about it? And I just love that. It's very, as I said a million times, it's very applicable, very practical writing book, this.
Was this the chapter that did scene anchoring?
Yes.
Yeah.
Was it?
I don't remember this. Very possibly. Oh, summary.
Yeah, I'm looking through the summary now. I think this is the one that does scene anchoring, or maybe that was the style one. No, that can't be the style. Oh yeah, it was the previous chapter, number 3. Check your scene opening for anchoring. Readers need to be located in time and space.
Yeah. Can I harp on that one just a little bit?
Always. You can harp on anything you want, Laura. You're always welcome in this house.
So scene anchoring for me was really important, is letting people know where you are in the world, where you are in time, which character you're with. I wrote an example of a place that is not anchored very well, and then super anchored. So I thought I'd read it real quick. Bombs dropped all around, sand exploding in great torrents. We were staring the enemy down, the long ends of our rifles. They didn't flinch. All we know is that it's a war. And so instead, if I anchor the scene, if this is the opening to the chapter or the story, I wrote, so this is with anchoring. The sun hadn't even risen yet as I tightened my laces, ready to storm Normandy. The crumpled letter in my pocket containing my orders were dated yesterday, June 5th, 1944. The entire ship's crew and occupants gazed at the calm before the sea. Then the ramp lowered. Bombs dropped all around us as I scrambled for shore, sand exploding in great torrents obscuring my vision. I snapped my rifle into position, aiming in the calm between each shattering burst. There, down the barrel, I spotted the enemy, and he spotted me. Neither of us flinched as we pulled our triggers. So, we know which war this is. We know what day it is. There is a main character, and we know that it is
June 5th.
This
Normandy.
one's June 6th. Yeah,
Sorry.
so we know it's first person as well because it obscured my vision. So
Did your first Gothic sentence have a character, Laura?
when my booted not the first sentence, but the first paragraph, yes.
Okay.
The first sentence was about the snowflakes.
Yeah. But you did mention the school, so that's like an anchor. And time because it's snowing.
Uh-huh.
And you immediately know it's a student because there was the mention of carrying books full of knowledge or something like that. So there's like, you think about, okay, that's a student.
Yeah. So
How have you anchored your writing, Malin?
Absolutely not. I'm joking. I probably have. I don't have an example at hand though.
It's fine. But yeah, that's very much the gist of this. Show versus tell, when to use what and when to not use. When to use tell and when to use show. Very wordy today. Anna says,
I also liked, I was just going to say on that chapter that she gives a bunch of examples of the same scenes, I think, if I remember correctly.
yeah, she's rewritten one of her scenes in different styles.
In different levels. And it almost felt like she wasn't as prescriptive as, like she wasn't saying like, you should use it that way. If anything, I didn't like the ultimate level and I preferred one before. And it's kind of almost telling you on the scale of,
1 to 5. How anchored do you want to be?
Exactly. Well, how much showing do you want to do? How much telling do you want to do? It's just like, yeah.
Anna says, complete side note, but I do love a good scene anchoring in writing vlogs. I love vlogs editing that holds my hands a little bit, remind me what day it is, what are we doing, what's the progress bar, little stuff like that. I do love that.
Yes.
Which I think you do very well, both Malin and Anna, in your writing vlogs. Like the retreat ones you had last year, gold.
I love putting dates on my writing vlogs, and I feel like no one cares and no one really reads the dates, but like to me it helps my brain.
I read the dates.
It's the morning, it's like, I'm making my first coffee, I'm making my second coffee, I'm making my third.
Yeah, I do like it. This is such a tangent, but I also do like writing vlogs that has a goal. Like today we're gonna do a first, we're gonna do like a first read through, and then it shows like Tuesday 50%, Wednesday 55%. Like I love that. Makes me feel like a story and not just like, oh, here's some B-roll of me eating like a pastry or whatever.
I also
you get guideposts of progress. You get guideposts saying, okay, we are here now, and we are making our way towards our final goal. We're not on a complete tangent.
I do love it.
Which I love. I'm scared for the person the article is about, but I love the example of showing. Yeah. It is, we care, Malin. We care.
You read the dates.
I actually put date breaks in my vlog, And also love it when they do those little break up the play bar at the bottom. So I'm just like okay, I want to know what she thinks about day 2. Okay, I love that. But yep, tangent. Give me all the goals and dates. I will also update people when I fail at the goal too, because that's important. Yes, for sure. Speaking of important, our next step is step 5, Chinwag Central, which I had no idea what was about, but it was about dialogue.
Chin wagging is talking.
Because you're wagging your chin.
See, this was not natural to me as a non-English speaker. I'm like, chin wag, what?
I discovered this word like 4 or 5 years ago in one of my agency meetings where someone being like, oh, when we're having like discussions between designers, we're calling it chin wag. And I was like, what the fuck is that word? What does it mean? I've never heard this before.
Well, you have the advantage of living in England. Disadvantage, ? But I'm not surrounded by English culture, so. ? But yeah, this step is about dialogue and this is something that I hadn't thought about before. Well, I don't think I've actively thought about it, but she had like an opening quote saying that dialogue is between characters and not between the author and reader, which I thought was so interesting. Like, it's so obvious, yet a lot of my dialogue, I'm like, okay, the reader needs to know this, so blah, 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 blah. And I thought that was so interesting and really put dialogue in perspective for me. I don't know if any of you ever thought about that.
I think the main thing I remember from this chapter, unless it was in a different one, correct me if I'm wrong, is the part where she's like, you don't need to have all of these different, what are they called, the dialogue tags, where they're like,
action
he
tags.
frowned, she, like he, all of the complex one. And I feel like the first time I read this was actually a long time ago, and I've since then learned she said is best. Like, just straight to the fucking point. It doesn't need
Straight
to
to
be.
the fucking point, she said.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
See,
I'm.
that's one I have an issue with. Is
I don't have an
I
issue with it. I think
Flowery.
if you're going to use an action tag, you should use it consciously.
yes, but also you're always told use strong verbs, and said isn't always a strong verb. Like,
Yeah.
ugh.
But I agree with, at least for me personally, and that's also, I think this is why she's often like, choose your preferences, choose your fighter. You don't have to
Yeah.
stick to the rules she's establishing. If you like a more flowery prose, it makes sense that you're probably going to have more complex dialogue tags. I like a more functional and straight to the point prose, so I prefer just she said. But also just because as a reader, when I read these types of books, if there's like a bunch of dialogue tags, I'm taken out of the dialogue, and then it's not flowing anymore, and I'm thinking about the word, and yeah, it's a beautiful word, but like I'm not in the action of the dialogue, and I feel like dialogue is action. I don't know if that makes sense, but
I break up my dialogue a lot with action of like I don't like talking head where it's like one person, it's like a close-up, a mid shot of here up, like this person is talking, this person is talking, this person is talking, just back and forth. I don't like it. I need them to be rolling their mug in their hand just as a nervous gesture, or like tapping a pen or walking with them down a hall. Like, I need them to be doing something so that this isn't just a white room dialogue set piece. I need it to be
Well, that's something she
multifunctional.
says to do also.
Sorry?
That's something Sacha also says, though. You should intersperse your dialogue with action. And I think she said doesn't take away from any like action tag.
Yeah.
But I just think like she smirked or she chuckled or like she
I
said
don't use those
vivaciously.
ones. I don't use those ones. But like,
But
once
it's
a project, I allow myself an ejaculate just for lols. Like,
no,
ejaculate.
no. I use like he yelled or he screamed or like he moaned.
but okay, but like you have both. I feel like both have their function. I like both in a book. I like to have both because you're going to have scenes that are a little bit more like there's a few poses, the dialogue is more awkward, it takes a bit longer, there are like breaks in between, and then there's sometimes like it's more actiony, it's more fast-paced. You want it to be like boom, 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 next person, and then it's you've got a break. And I like they each have their function, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
Anna chimes in with, you can prize smirk for my cold dead hands.
Fan and Draco.
Fanfiction Central, please.
Yeah, but that's something she says that I think the big takeaway from this step is like your characters are talking, not you and your readers.
Yes, don't use dialogue to info dump stuff to your
don't
reader.
overuse names, don't avoid exposition, and then match dialogue to era, which I think is really difficult. At least I struggle with it. But like, obviously my novel is set in like Colorado, 1881. So like, what does that look like in terms of language? Because I'm just currently using a lot of yeehaw slang. Not sure if it's any accurate whatsoever. But
every page there's a yeehaw in one of the dialogue boxes.
No, it's just like howdy, like stuff like that. And I'm enjoying it, which is my
Go
big
rustle up
thing
some
with
grub.
writing. Yeah, but definitely something to be aware of is like not age appropriate, but also that, but time appropriate dialogue. And then differentiating character dialogue, I also find really hard, especially if they're like characters from a similar family or similar household. Like, I know in my brain that they don't speak the same, but when I write dialogue, it's just like blah 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 blah.
Yeah.
Have you guys made word banks of common words or phrases that each character would use?
No. That's something you do?
No, it's something I've thought about doing, but I haven't yet. It might help.
I considered doing it for one of my books, but I was too lazy to do it, which is the story of my life. So
Considered it, too lazy to do it.
Yeah.
Grape says, "Did you just say ejaculation? Did I hear correctly? You did. Once a novel, I allow myself a he ejaculated, just for the lulz. It's going to disappear in any like revision, but I've never gotten to a revision stage. But it's something for me. It's a treat. It's like a reward.
It's a treat for yourself. Nice.
Masticate.
Yeah.
Talk with your mouth open.
And that's just Chinwag Central. This does not look correct. Why does my
Number
let's
6
see.
is word delicacies, if that's what you're looking for.
Yeah, I found her. Found her. Another title that I found very confusing. Like I get what it's about, but the titling is just really.
I agree, because every single time you're saying these, I'm like, what the fuck was that about again? I have completely forgotten.
Yeah.
Ooh,
Sam
I
says
really
if they're from a
catch
similar
that
back.
Sorry. I got
Sam
excited.
says if they are from a similar background, they could sound similar though. Like my sister and I are definitely share some vernacular. That's fair. But it's just, I think I read somewhere, and by read I saw a TikTok once upon a dream that said something like the point or like the purpose or like the goal of dialogue isn't to imitate life, but to emulate life or something. I don't know. Maybe it was reversed.
I feel like it's almost you have to write in a cartoonish way, exaggerate some stuff so that it's clearer. This is this person, this is that person. Even though in real life, me and my best friend probably speak the exact same way because we've been best friends for 20 years. But in a book, we would have to be differentiated so that people are like, this is that character, this is this character, right?
Yeah.
Also cutting out the small talk and getting to the point.
Yeah.
And cutting out all the ums and the pauses and the...
I mean,
I like some.
I'm an abuser of comma, blah blah blah.
But sometimes it's an indicative of like this character is like stressing about what to say here or something. No, like if it serves a purpose specifically.
I mean, yes, if it's consciously good, if it's unconsciously bad.
If you're just transcribing something you're overhearing at a table, you would probably cut all the ums.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know what this is in relation to, but you're welcome.
The ejaculation.
Regina says, what lovely conversation. I got revision input from 6K words. Slay, Regina. Needed company. Happy to provide it. Anna says, so true. My sister and I just speak the same memes.
It's just really old vines for me and my brother.
I think the troublemakers, we have like a very particular way of memifying things, and then
all of you are going to say call in at some point or another, but like in a book we choose one person to say that.
Yeah, and we just like to take a joke and then beat it to the ground, all four of us. Greg says I'm an abuser of as a filler word, which is valid. Let's see,
I'm an abuser of she snorted. People snort too much in my books.
Every single one of my characters, they glance. They never look. They always glance, and it's gotta stop. It's too much. And word delicacies is about words, the difference between weak and strong verbs, about like adjectives.
You almost said ejaculation there.
Ejaculation. Yep, that's a lot of this book was about ejaculation. And then she said that the thesaurus is your best friend. And I agree to learn new words, but I feel like sometimes you can tell that an author has used a thesaurus, and that takes me out of it.
Yeah.
But I do love learning new words, so I'm usually fine by it. But sometimes I'm like, there's got to be an easier way.
I feel like this chapter is probably the one I integrated the most this time around when I reread. I feel like I had read like half of the book last time in 2020. And this time around, as I reread it, this is the chapter that hit me the most, where I was like, oh, I love very purposefully chosen words that follow like maybe almost like a metaphor, and you sort of see them forming, like the example Laura gave earlier of the pregnant clouds. It's so evocative. It has such a strong meaning. And I feel like I almost did that a bit more this time around as I was revising my chapters of The Art of Summoning Demons, which was nice. But like I learned a thing.
What do you know? And I think just the fact that we know our writing is bad is proof that we are better than when we wrote whatever we wrote. So
yeah,
progress. But yeah, they talk about basically words. Just be conscious, be deliberate about the words you use in your story. Have them have meaning. Even better if they have more than one meaning. Think about like associated actions. Think about using specific words, like Malin said. And then she talks about complex negatives, which I use a lot.
Is that like the double, triple negatives or quadruple
it's
negatives?
Like instead of saying it was a light jacket, you say it wasn't a heavy jacket.
But do you know what? I feel like that's cultural.
Mm-hmm.
That could be cultural. Maybe
it is literally in French. That's how we speak. Like, I'm never gonna say this is good. I'm gonna say not bad. And that means that's fucking great. If you say not bad in French, it means it's fucking great. And like, it's hard to stop the culture coming in through the writing.
Yeah, and that's definitely something we do in Norwegian too. Like, we will say double negative or a complex negative instead of just saying it's good. We say like it's not bad. Or like it wasn't bad. It wasn't that bad.
Yeah, her examples are: it was not light. Change it to it was dark. It was not tall. It was short. It could not talk. It was silent. So I think also that helps just get rid of a couple of words here and there, which is helpful for flash fiction or drabbles when you only have a limited amount of words to use.
If anything, this book is teaching me everything I've learned trying to reach goals of, word counts. I have to unlearn.
Yeah, never start your writing journey with NaNoWriMo.
Yeah, good point.
But here we are. Did. Well, here I am, at least.
I started with Nano.
I did too. Let's see. I think it's time for a break, maybe. We've been going at it for a good hour and a half soon. Let's do Laura Nettles' timer. She's Laura Nettles is here.
Tormenting me with my presence.
It's a blessing. And don't you let anyone ever tell you otherwise.
Roy likes me.
And that's what matters, really. Who cares about me and Malin, honestly, if you have Roy's opinion. Don't forget that your character may use them a lot. Don't take those out, or in narration you may want to make a point. That's fair. And again, I think I think, again, consciously using these things are all right if you know what you're doing. But if you're like me and have no clue, then might be something to be on the lookout for. Let's see. We got a share screen.
Good means I long for death, but what's new?
It's hilarious because it's the opposite in French. It's like, we're going to use the most dramatic sentence just to say I don't like this. Like, the way people talk will be like, I'm disgusted. And it just means like, I don't want to finish late. This sucks. And it literally, you will say, disgusted about this.
Where are American things like fine, mean terrible, I'm good equals I'm longing for death? But what's new? Yeah. Regina brings up a good point, which is to make a point. It wasn't dark, more like twilight, but the sun was a red ball, a reminder of the forest fire raging over the hill. Again, consciously is, I think, the key word.
And responsibly.
Responsibly. Grape is like, am I French? I'm pretty sure you're not French. I think you're just Gemini. How dare you, Laura? August will now be the month of Laura Monday on my channel. Because I love an over-exaggeration. Yeah.
There's literally an expression in French that will be like, I will throw myself out of the window, and you just use it to be like, I'm really annoyed by this.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
There's that expression in Norwegian, like, how you doing? And then you answer, oh, I'm up and not crying. So
I love that.
That's a good one.
That's the standard. That's the bar. That's where the bar.
Like, hey, I'm up and I'm not crying. So obviously I'm doing great. Yeah. Also, something I noticed when I was hiking in England was instead of saying like hello or good day when you meet hikers, they say, how are you? And it's just like, I mean, you obviously don't want to know because you're just speeding past me.
Yeah.
But I thought it was so funny because they're like, oh, how are you? And that's a greeting. Like, I thought it was super fascinating.
It's sort of similar to in English when people used to say, how do you do? And you answer, how do you do? And you're not actually meant to say, I do well. You're just
yeah. Didn't even
Yeah, I
think
just
about
usually
that.
responded with a hey, and then continue walking. But I just
You just do the
something I
mad
noticed.
nod.
Yeah.
Well, if it's people younger than me, I do the up nod, and then if it's people older, I do the down nod.
Oh.
And that's like
Interesting. There's
that's
two
the difference.
nods.
It's two
Love
nods because you could be like hiya, or you could be like
Sup?
hiya. Anyway, again, we digress. We're going to dive into a sprint. This is a lower timer. Let's go.
a drama.
Drama. Let's not close StreamYard. Let's close YouTube.
Can you
So there
imagine?
you go.
Go on.
Have
You
done
had
before.
a
But the good
thumbnail
thing.
showing for zombies. I worked on the 3rd movie.
Oh, for
I didn't see
zombies.
the thumbnail.
I don't see any zombies here.
Top left.
Oh, the Disney show.
Yeah.
That is so cool, Laura.
That is very cool.
It's very cool. For anyone who didn't catch it, this is what I usually watch in a day. A little bit of vocal coach reacting to singing stuff.
I really like her content. She's also just such a calming, presence.
Yeah, she's my safe space. A little bit of counters, a little bit of Brittany Broski, a little bit of reading blogs, and a little bit of memes.
A little bit of Ugly Betty, I see.
I haven't watched Ugly Betty since it came out, so I don't know why I have this. I think it's because I recently watched the music video of what's her name, the actress for Wilhelmina?
I don't know her name. Sorry.
I want to say Vanessa Williamson, but I'm not sure. Anyway, not important. That was just a little insight into my algorithm. Let's see. We were joined by a Wallace. Hello, hello. Again, standing before me, complaining about my mic. Mike, I guess.
Like Mike's
Vanessa Williams. There you go. Was that what I said, or did I say Wendy?
I thought that's what you said, but I might be remembering it based off the comment and be like, yeah, I think that's what you said.
Sam says, I still have the stream up, but it's time for my oldest and I to watch our weekly episode, so we'll be here and there. What are you watching? Call in. Did I miss anything important? Some talk about French and American phrasing of living the dream. Regina's update is that she's 57% through dystopian revisions. Slay. Molly's fave is Je suis à bord de gouffre. I'm at the edge of the abyss. Gouffre. Use when work is tough. Yeah, I am also Je suis à bord de gouffre all the time. I don't think it's connected. Can you guys hear me?
We can hear you, but I don't know if it's from the mic or just from your computer. That might be what she's questioning.
But I've literally done nothing since last. Let's see.
No, it's been.
There you go.
The sound has been like this the whole time, so I never questioned it because I was like, "This is how the sound is."
It's apparently coming through my web camera, so for some ungodly reason. Is that any different?
Yeah, it's completely different.
I just love that you have not been saying anything for 2 hours, just accepting it.
Because the sound was fine. Yeah.
Wallish. She's a sound snub.
Like, we could hear you, so it was like, yeah, it's fine.
You said Williamson, lol. But you did do pause between the Williams and the Sons, so your first instinct was right. Yeah, I know her from Desperate Housewives, where she played one of my favorite characters, so that's why I know. Let's see. He chose Supernatural. Oh God, how old is your child now, Sam? I guess I've known you for some years now, so they do grow, don't they?
The first seasons of Supernatural are a bit more like Buffy-esque. They're like a monster.
That's fair. That's fair. We're on episode 2. I now force them to watch one episode of their choice a week, because otherwise I only see them as they pass through the kitchen. There you go. Speaking of kitchens, we're going to go back into the literary kitchen and to step number 7, which is descriptive prose. And as you will remember, Marlon, because you recently read the book.
Do not put me on the spot.
Descriptive prose is the chapter where he's talking about how to use prose in your descriptions.
So you remember that chapter well as well, Steve.
I remember. It's only because I have my first pointer is this is the chapter about descriptive prose. But yeah, something I feel like Laura is very good at is descriptions, and you take, and she talks about this, Sacha Black, in her book, but you're very good at taking. She had a word for it that has since left my brain, but taking inanimate object and then adding like human / emotional qualities to them.
I do it all the time.
You do that so incredibly well, and to great effect, I think, because I'm always horrified with whatever you produce. But
She
yeah,
also
I
talks
think that's
about
something very good.
the hero lens, I think, is the
That's my
fascinating
favorite part of this
for me.
chapter.
Yes, very
And
much the hero lens.
I put some, as you can see, I have like little stickers everywhere, and I put one specific one where I was like, "Oh, I'm gonna have to pay attention to this specifically for Space Princess Project because I have 2 POVs, and I feel like that's gonna be really useful to sort of integrate more into the POVs."
God. So what did you learn from the hero lens?
The example I bookmarked was, do they like the smell of roast chicken and therefore describe it as rich, succulent smell? Or are they a vegetarian who think it smells of sour flesh? And I felt like these were so extreme that it was such a great example. So that's why I bookmarked that one.
Do you want to talk about your use of the hero lens, Laura?
So for me, it's kind of, I use the hero lens of tinting how things are described, like Mullen just said. So how are they feeling about a person, and also what is the main character's profession? Like if somebody is like a model, they might look at a person's features and bone structure and stuff like that first, and their poise and how they carry themselves. But a fashion designer would probably look at what are they wearing first. What is the cut and the colors and the textures of the fabrics? Is it nicely tailored? Things like that. So describing people through how the main character actually thinks and not how you as an author thinks.
That is such a good point. I literally look at fonts and advertising all the fucking time from the designer point of view.
Mm-hmm.
That I should be writing this kind of lens through in my books.
Just make all your main characters graphic designers.
Exactly. So it helps when writing what you know, like making a main character have lenses that overlap with yours. So you can
But I'm not a monster hunter. How would I do that?
Well, I'm trying to think about like what would be the equivalent of a monster hunter in the real world.
I guess a police officer, question mark?
Yeah, probably. Or I was actually thinking more something to do with animals and stuff, you know? It depends on what kind of monsters you have.
Both
like
humanoid and animalistic.
Think of like, you know, crocodile
Steve Irwin
type of I went with
Steve
more
Irwin.
fictional version of that, but yes.
I guess that makes sense. And I think Laura's tip of like finding lenses that overlap with yours is a very good tip. I've always wanted to use like my nursing knowledge in a text sometime. So that's something I'll work on at some point. A pet person? I don't believe you're allowed to have pet persons anymore. Or am I misunderstanding?
So I like to merge the senses with the hero's lens. So not only are we seeing things like tinted through how the hero would describe them, but we're also feeling things interact with the hero. We're feeling the sand beneath their feet. We are feeling the sun burning their skin, things like that. So
that's the chapter after. And
I think so.
Yeah, I think, right?
So I like to...
Yeah, sensory, emotion, potion.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I like to squish them all into one big thing.
Yeah, for this chapter, she specifically spoke about descriptive prose and, like, as you said, the hero's lens, and then kind of the balance, I guess, between show and tell, where you, like, choose the ability to either paint richly or, like, keep it vague, and how you have to layer that in a text, and that makes sense, I think. Also, again, speaking about anchoring the scene through your anchoring the reader through like a time, a description, and stuff like that. Like, don't be vague, just be as specific as you can, or as specific as you want to be, I guess.
Don't just say time passed. Give us some detail.
Yeah. Don't be vague, Albritton. Sometime later doesn't give us anything. Also, you know, if, as you say, if something is important to your main character, describe it, or like notice it. If something is relevant for the plot, pick up and describe it in your prose. And I love it when scenes, like, you're focused on a thing in a scene. Like, for example, in my scene, as a focus on killing the monster that's trying to kill my main character. But then in this description and in this interaction with the monster and in the focus with the monster, you just inject some like information that's not relevant, but is relevant to the scene, but it's not like, it's like when you hold an apple here, but then you're like holding a other treat over here. So you're distracting from like what you want to tell the reader. And that's something I
Exactly.
think prose does really well, like distracting from what you wanna, like distracting, using the focus of the scene to tell something that, I don't know how to say this eloquently,
So
but
a character is being mugged by gunpoint. They're not going to be describing how there is an owl flying over the moon overhead. They're going to be focused on what does this person smell like with their rancid breath as they're demanding whatever they want from you. You're going to be focused on the glint of the moonlight on the barrel of the gun. You're going to be focused on, is your balance secure? Can you make a dodge? Like, you're going to be focused on here and now and not the rest of the scene. You are focused on what this hero is focusing on.
I was so about to say, unless they have ADHD, because I was like, oh no, oh yes, you're mugging me. Yes, sorry.
I think in a mugging situation, maybe your ADHD would be taken over by your like survival
I
instinct.
say this as the loving wife of a very high ADHD husband.
I have ADHD.
So that's what this chapter is about, like using the hero's lens to show what the protagonist notices about things. And I also like the writing advice, and I've seen this all around, but like when you use your hero lens to describe things, you should describe them obviously from your character's point of view, but that also showing, like, don't just describe like their eyes and the hair and the dress, like describe something interesting, if that makes sense.
I feel like that was one that I also vividly remember as part of the little pieces of advice that I quite liked from this book. The one about what specifically are they going to notice about this character. And like, for instance, in the scenes I was rewriting, there's one where there's a lawyer character who comes to the door at some point. And in my first scene, I just described sort of how he was dressed and everything. And in my rewrite, I basically wrote more about all the little details that makes her think he comes from money, but subtle money. And she notices this because her mom is from the same background. And suddenly it's a lot more linked into why she notices that. And I really enjoyed that advice. That was really good. Yeah.
Sam says that they love the hero's lens, one of their favorite ways to show characterization in narrative. And that's also something that Anatomy of Prose is speaking about, how to describe personality traits through like showing action and reaction and thoughts and dialogue, and just like don't tell the reader but show them. And I think that's a really good advice. Let's see how far we've gotten. I lost a step. There you go. Step number 8, which is what Laura just dipped into, sensory schmensory emotion potion, which is again about filtering a little bit.
This one, I think, for me, the main thing that I recall is the fact that she talks about the sense of smell and how people often forget to use it. And it made me so much more aware in my writing of like, what does this smell like? You start wondering everything. What does that smell like? What does this smell like?
Yeah, that's something definitely a scent that people underuse, I think. At least in drafts. Maybe that's something you add later. I think vision is very easy to go to. And then like touch, but in terms of texture, not necessarily like temperature, blah, blah, blah. But I think I don't think I know because I read the book, I swear to God. But this one speaks about like the emotions and how they are connected to the sensory system, and like how you can use the different emotions and different sensors to...
This is the Laura chapter.
This is the creating prose. That is for sure the Laura bit. And how you can kind of use the layer of emotions to show off your character. And I thought that was really interesting because that's something as I've said many times, I'm a police report writer. So it's very like stripped of any emotion almost. There's a little bit of like thought and emotion, but usually it's just like, it's very much a police report. And then I have to work really hard to add in emotions later. And then that also makes it really hard to kind of upload a theme in advance instead of having to go back and just work a theme into your text. Because I think emotion is like such a great way to show like theme and with symbolism and all that. But yeah, that's was a chapter about filtering, and again about how to use emotion and how to not filter emotion. So
I liked
instead of saying she was angry, you say like describe what she feels like and what that feels like to be angry. And then also one thing that I noticed was she had an example which was a description of the smell of rage, and I just thought that was such a unique way to go about it.
That's what she excels at for me, is the able to use the senses to describe emotions, like be able to taste. This one says, for example, tasting emotions is a powerful way to create imagery and evoke emotion in a reader. Have you ever been so angry your mouth dries and tastes poisonous? Like, the words are bitter and like things like that. Just use the senses when describing emotions, and how it's not you're angry, but you have a ball of like heat in your rib cage. Just different ways that you can describe emotions with senses just blew my mind when I first read it.
Yeah.
And I also think that's something you excel in, Laura, is using emotion and senses in your writing.
Oh.
This is just the Praise Laura stream, and I'm okay with that. Anything else to add to the sensory emotion potion? How good are you to use it in your writing? Like, do you subconsciously or consciously work this in?
Oh, don't ask me that. I feel like the hide the monster was also a really interesting passage in one of the chapters, the one that's on creating fear in prose. I liked when she says, I actually think it's a quote from another book. Yeah, she quotes another book and she says, hide the monster, whether it's a physical, emotional, or mental monster. Hide it from the reader until the last possible moment. The greatest fear in our lives comes from the unknown. And I feel like that's such good advice, because I often find when I read books that manage to get the sense of fear, it's not always the elaborate descriptions of what the scary thing is. It's more, she's terrified, something's coming, and you don't know what it is, and you don't see it. And then, you know, like it's the Blair Witch Project. It's, you never see the witch.
He's kind of giving a little bit Alfred Hitchcock. I don't know if you've seen that scene where he says like 10 people are sitting around the table and then it blows up. Like, that's not interesting. But if you tell the reader there's a bomb under the table and then the conversation continues, like that's interesting. So that's kind of juxtaposition to that.
It's like the tension creation of it. Yeah.
That's surprise versus suspense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
My computer's dying.
Oh no. R.I.P. So that's something I really thought was really helpful to me in this moment in my writing process, was this chapter, the sensory and emotions, how to use emotions and sensations to describe each other. And then we got into maybe my least favorite chapter.
Which one was that?
Philosophy, poetry, and quotable prose. That was just so wishy-washy for me.
I don't remember anything from this chapter.
I think she talked about expressionism and how you should read expressionism poems to hone your craft in describing emotions. And I can see it, but I don't know. There was just something so vague about this for me.
Oh, I did have, there were some passages that I found more useful than others. I enjoyed the passage about, wait, no, I'm in the next chapter. I'm so sorry. Literally, I have nothing.
This was the one where she talked about expressionism and poetry and how to create expressionist poetry and like use. There's two ways to go about it. You can use defamiliarization, which is like presenting something old in a new, unfamiliar way, or you can use juxtaposition, which is like comparing two opposite things, like the perfect versus the broken, night versus day. Yeah, and then she talks about something I've never heard, which is aphorism, which I never heard as a concept before, which is universal truth distilled into clear and concise structure.
But even as you're telling me all of this again, it still tells me nothing, and I still don't remember what this was about, because I think I'm on the same page as you with this chapter.
Yeah. Just she was like, if you want to create symbolism, look to your emotions. I don't know. It was just very wishy-washy to me.
I feel like she had less examples of how to put this into action, basically, and this was harder to grasp as a concept because of that.
Because we're dumb.
That Roy is very like,
That's Roy.
He's very opinionated about step 9.
He wants to get on the bed.
Is he not allowed on the bed?
He is. He just thinks he can't jump up on it. He needs me to lift him and put him on it every time.
He's a little
Any opinions on step 9, Laura? You seem like you'd enjoy this.
So the whole poetry and everything, I loved all the literary techniques that this book went over, like anthropomorphism and juxtaposition and all that stuff. I loved all the poetry techniques. But
isn't that another chapter?
Yeah.
So this chapter, I'm just saying.
This one was a bit over my head. So
yeah. I think that's a good way of describing it. It was a bit over my head. It was not for me. And that's fine. Not everything has to be for me. It sounds like it's possible it's not something she herself has a strong grasp on. That's kind of the impression I got. But then again, she does shade that she reads a lot of expressionism, like in terms of poetry.
It just felt like it shouldn't have been its own chapter. It should have, if anything, been part of that bigger chapter where she's like, here's all the techniques you can apply. And
for sure. Yeah, this could have been an email.
Yeah.
But I guess she needed 12 chapters, so.
Yeah.
But speaking of a chapter that did speak to me, chapter 10, Cracking the Character Code, I thought it was a really good chapter and kind of puts not into new perspective, but kind of organizes character construction in a way that made sense to me, which I really loved because I'm not really a list type of guy. Like I can't do like a character sheet because it gives me nothing. Like I know that my character had brown eyes and that's about it. Like I don't know, likes and dislikes and foods and like stuff like that. That doesn't really help me. But I felt like this one was really, really strong.
The one thing I really remember from that one was the uniqueness part where she talks about creating habits and quirks for your characters. And it's where I sort of take that aspect of like make your character almost a little bit more a cartoonish version of a real person and have them have a more specific like quirk that is memorable because it might not be as such in real life, but then it creates a more unique character. So I quite like that.
She sort of speaks of how good characterization requires a mixture of things, obviously. But she pointed out 3 specific ones, which was emotion, choice, and uniqueness, as you say, where, ask yourself, like, the question when you get stuck in your text, like, what is my character? What are their habits and quirks? How would they see this problem? How do they use these emotions and how do they reflect on their experiences and like their past when they're doing these choices? So, full disclosure, I didn't read this book, just going off how discussion goes. Chapter 12 sounds like it needed a lot more solid examples. That was chapter 9. Did I say chapter 12? Yeah, chapter 9, philosophy. We're not yet into chapter 12. But yeah, no, 100% agree. But I really like this. She spoke in the beginning of some kind of Russian director, actor, trainer, teacher. I didn't retain that information, but he had like 3 different ways of educating his actors. And that really made sense to me in terms of characteristics.
Stanislavski?
Yes, that sounds familiar.
Yeah.
And then again, she talks a little bit about the hero lens, the character lens. Like when you describe something, describe it through your character's eyes and not through you as the author's eyes. And also a little bit of how you are not your characters, but your characters is telling the story. So, like again, from character to character and not from author to reader, if that makes sense.
I liked also her advice regarding physical description of characters, saying things like, I think the example she gave was how to turn a feature about someone into something more interesting by giving the consequences of that feature.
Yes, for sure.
Like how she's like, he's, you know, in the first description, he was average height with brown eyes and a heart stare. And then the second example of the same sentence, it goes, he slipped through the crowd and noticed his height allowing him to slide behind taller bodies. I caught his intense brown eyes and faltered. They were so dark, they were almost black. And it's just a much more deeper way of describing the same man.
Yeah. It
I
makes
think
it
it
so
was-
it's not just a laundry list of these are the basic that you list every time you introduce a character, so people
Yeah.
can visualize it.
Because
But
that's how my draft be looking. I'm like, okay, eyes, hair, height, check, move on. Maybe clothes if I'm feeling fancy.
fancy. Yeah. So that one example definitely stuck in my brain.
Yeah. There was one where she described a scene, the same scene, but two different characters. One was a lady and one was a man. And I just thought that was really evocative. So,
Mhm.
again, I think she did great on the description.
Mm. And there was one
Uh,
about death that was very emotional and interesting. At the end of that chapter, she goes on death and characterization, and she gives an example of how to make death more poignant. And she gave an example
Yes.
from one of her own books, and I was like, "Oh, that's very beautifully written." So it's a
Yeah.
good.
I was like, should I read this book?
I don't read YA anymore. Otherwise, maybe I would pick it up. But yeah,
You could read the adult lesbian ones.
Exactly.
could.
The vampires.
I could. But is there a beautiful death description? I hope so.
It's
Probably
vampires.
with
It's gotta
vampires. If not, I think she's missing the mark. Next mark, speaking of, is step 11, self-editing. And this one was really helpful, I think, as someone who hasn't myself done a full like novel revisions. I've revised short stories, and that it's the same thing, but like on a much lesser scale, obviously.
Mm.
But here she goes through a lot of things to look for in edits, and I thought it was just easier to show than tell this one.
It's a really good checklist to keep for when you're at that stage and be like, all right, let me double, tick this one. I've done this one and go next.
Yeah.
So it's really good and useful for that.
Yeah, here she talks about all the different types of edits and what to look for and like, yeah. And
Can
I
you
just
zoom
thought
in?
it was. Oh, can I zoom in? Probably.
Usually it's control scroll.
I'm old. I'll just click the buttons.
Okay.
Did that help, Laura, for your
Yes,
eyesight?
Lucha. Excellent.
And here she talks about like the difference between revising and editing, and also tips and tricks and what to like different checklist things. And I just wrote it all down because I thought this could come in handy. But yeah, that's definitely something to check out. I think if you are, especially if you're new to editing like I am, in terms of novel editing, and like where do I begin?
Oh, and the simplest one sentence advice of read your manuscript on a different device.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yes. How to spot an error. Just read it. And even just, I tend to turn my manuscript from dark mode to light mode or the other way around. Even just that helps massively.
So I don't know if you guys know, but Readsy, you can format and export your book as an EPUB for free.
Oh, didn't know.
So I can do that. I can put my book in the Readsy book editor, export it, put it in my Kindle app, and read it.
Well, you can also just put a PDF file in the Kindle.
It doesn't, the format is not quite as good as just the one that's made for Kindle, I think.
I guess that makes sense.
Because this has the table of contents that you can...
Because that's what I do whenever I get my friends' books. I'll have them send it into a PDF and then I'll upload it to Kindle. And it usually looks great.
I have Crimson Strings on here so that I can read it and figure out what the heck is happening. But yeah. Also, something I learned getting Tiny Shivers edited was sometimes your crutch words aren't the normal crutch words. So my words that were repeated often in my stories were the word maw for like mouth for the creatures.
Okay.
and bioluminescence, and
This is so specifically you.
I know, it's like, you're right. Like, it's fine when it's just one story, but it's when it's all of them one after the other. It's like, oh dang, those are my go-to phrases. And inhuman vocal cords is another thing that I go to often for my cosmic horror. So it's like, ugh.
She does give you the parameter of, was it 10 to 60? Like, look for words that you've used 10 to 60 times, because those are your like real crutch words. Those are the ones you need to watch out for.
As in not the ones you use all the time, because
Yeah, because they'll just be
said.
like the and
And
as and like whatever. So I think she said 10 to 60 times. Look for that. Oh my god, what a snuggle bug.
He just went under my pillows.
Oh, that's so cute. So I think that's the parameter she said, like 10 to 60 words. Like, look for those frequencies. And Wendy says the Scrivener lets you do that too. It does indeed. Also, I think Word lets you do that. And then even Google Docs, ? Maybe not Google Docs. I don't think Google Docs lets you see that. Wendy says, I use a PDF on my Kindle Scribe because I can write notes on it with a pen. Oh, that's clever.
Nice.
That's good. I actually started doing this. I bought myself a thermal printer so I can print some of my chapters really quickly. It's look at it. It's a printer. It prints.
Yeah.
Do you just shove a paper in the one end and then it prints it out in the other end?
Literally. And
This is my printer, but it's a Polaroid.
All the pages I printed from that. So.
Oh, freeze that and read your text if you want. That's so clever, though. I might get, because I had one of those big Brother LaserJet printers, and it's just, it takes so much space.
I hate how much space printers take, and it was just driving me
and
crazy.
Even now, they've started to, like, you have to have a subscription to use the printer, which is ridiculous.
Yeah,
so stupid.
All the stuff about ink is so annoying. This is not cheaper, I'm not going to lie, because thermal paper costs a lot of money, but I don't print enough to, like, if anything, it's cheaper for me because I don't need it that much, you know? Like, I'm not going to print book after book after book. That's not what I'm doing. It's literally just when I'm like, I want to reread 2 chapters and that's it.
If the printer paper gets warm, does it erase what is printed on it?
I think in order to erase it, you need like UV light or something. And I'm not quite sure exactly how much of it you need for that to happen. But essentially, you know, like receipt tickets you get in a shop, they're all thermal printers. Yeah. So just, I mean, a receipt that's been in your pocket for like, you know, 2 months, everything is erased. Yes, but otherwise, it's fine.
I just use a printer at work. But...
Fair. I can't do that. We have a co-working space, and it's quite visible when you go to the printer.
The printer is just tucked away in a little corner office that nobody uses, so it's perfect.
That is good.
Anna said, subscription for a printer? Ugh, living the dream. Google Docs let you export in an EPUB? Yes. Okay, that's very handy.
Nice.
And then the last chapter, which again I thought was very wishy-washy. The entire book could have just been this, and that would have been better, I think.
It was just a lot of different things that didn't really belong together, I thought. But like some of them were useful and I enjoyed, and some of them less so. But I just felt like, why is this one chapter?
And these were just not like things to like read from A to B. I think this is the things you have to like. This is things you can look up if you're wondering. Oh, sentence length. Like I looked up that. So they was just all gathered. Like
you have sentence length and then foreshadowing and then prologues. Yeah. None of these belong together. Like they just don't in my head. This organization makes no sense.
Yeah, and that's definitely what I felt like. This was a dumping ground for anything. She just like didn't know where to put.
Yeah.
And I feel like maybe the entire book could have been formatted like that, just like a lexicon, rather than the step program. But I also enjoyed the step program. It made it easier to follow through. But yeah, that was the last step. That's the 12 steps to sensational writing. Laura has used these steps, and as we all know, she's a phenomenal writer even. So they do work. It's just a matter of consciously apply them to your writing. That was a difficult word for Elmo, not gonna lie. And that's the 12 steps. First of all, just a quick round table. Who is this book for?
Anyone who's writing.
Anybody looking to increase their sentence level and paragraph level prose. Not necessarily for plot, not for like no beat sheets or anything. This is for prose.
I feel like this is a very good step up from like Save the Cat. Like once you've read a couple of novels, once you've read a couple of craft books about plot, I think this is like the next step of. This would be a natural next step of the journey. Like, okay, now I know about plot structure, but how do I actually write? Like, what does it mean to write?
But I also think there's no good time for this book. It's literally at any point.
I mean, yeah, it's applicable to like, but that's the same with any craft book. There's no good time. You can just read it whenever.
Yeah, but I mean, there's some books that I might feel like, for instance, Story Genius to me felt slightly more advanced in the way of I'd rather know first how to write something and then get into this and then evolve. Oh, here's how I can get a concept for my writing. And there's some of the craft books that I feel like are a little bit more specific. But this one, I feel like you could read it as a, beginner or as someone who's written for a few years if you want to evolve your prose.
I think this is intermediate for me. I think Save the Cat, that's a beginner craft book. That's like if you ever like, oh, I want to read craft books about writing, but I have no idea where to start. My go-to is always Save the Cat, because that's such a beginner-friendly novel craft book, I feel like. This one, I wouldn't recommend to someone who's like on their first novel, for example, or like someone who's drafting their first book, like yours truly. So I don't know, but it's a good book. I think it definitely belongs in like your writing toolbox. Is that a thing we have? I don't know.
Yeah.
So that's who this book is for. Someone who's looking to upgrade their prose levels. Do you see yourself using this in your own process, or in Laura's case, do you use this in your own process?
Yes.
Definitely. I feel like I've touched upon a couple of examples specifically, but just in general, I think a few of these pieces of advice have anchored in my brain, and I'm now even subconsciously integrating them a little bit more in my writing process. But I think if I'm actively line editing something, I might also go back to the book and try to consciously adapt somewhat. I was going to say conscientiously. I can't use the word.
Consecutively? I don't know. But yeah, I feel like this is definitely one of those books that you can be like, oh, okay, let me just look up this one thing that I'm interested in looking up right now. Yeah. And I feel like not a whole lot of craft book does this, but Save the Cat does it. Like, it's very reapplicable. You can look up things you're wondering.
Yeah.
And this is the same. This is a nice book to have on hand. And also, the last question of the evening, roll the die. What is your rating out of 6? Out of 6, it says. And that's a typo. You didn't see it.
For me, it's a 5. The only one missing is just the, like you said, the wishy-washy chapters. I felt like, just in terms, it could have been 10 steps. It didn't need to be 12. And 10 is a nice number. Why not 10?
Yeah. I think she has the type of humor where she's like a 12-step program, like for alcoholism. I think that's the metaphor she's going with. Because her villain books has like 13 steps to writing a great villain. So I think
it's
that's
10 steps to hero.
Yeah. So I agree 100% with Malin. I think this is a 5 for me too. It's a great book. It could have definitely been shorter.
Yeah.
For sure.
But it deserves the 5 just on the basis of what you said about reusability. Like, I can see myself pick up this book again over time, and it's not just, I've read it, now it's on my shelves, done, Yeah.
Yeah. Because some of the crafting books have been that, like,
yeah.
Again, without slandering Story Genius, but Story Genius, I would
Which
probably...
we do every single video.
I hope to God Lisa Cron never watches these videos. If you're among the 5 watching Lisa, call in.
And there's also people I know who generally loved her book and have found it
Yes.
really useful.
And that's great.
good,
I'm not
you
here
know?
to tell you what to read and not to read. I'm just here to tell you what I
Exactly.
think about things.
Mhm.
And then my friends are here to tell you what they think about them. Laura, roll the die.
Can I give it a 5.5?
Do you see 5.5 dies around here? No. It's got to be whole numbers. That's part of the challenge.
Is it a 5 or a 6?
I'll give it a 6. Why not?
Oh, wow. Okay. Certified
So
6 from Laura.
the exercises have transformed my writing.
I'm gonna do them. Like, well, we're gonna close the stream, and I'm just gonna go straight to the exercise book.
Yeah, I'm gonna download the workbook. That's for sure. Something
I was just doing the exercises in this book, like just doing them in a notebook.
Yeah, but I think is the workbook not those exercises? Is it more?
I
Is
don't
it
know.
different? 'Cause
I
it's
don't
so
know.
separate.
I don't have the workbook, but like it opened my mind. I'd never heard really of flash fiction before I read this, and so I read this, and the first thing I wrote after it was my first ever flash, which was Rise of Cthulhu, and it just changed my trajectory. There would be no Tiny Shivers without this book.
And that's a glowing review from Laura. Mars, nope, not Mars. I don't know where that came from. I think it's Mom. Mom said it sounds like this is for the drafting and revising after you've gotten some writing under your belt. For sure, I think that's where this fits in the process.
Yes.
Already used a lot of what we all discussed in their own process. Do you want to give a die? I mean, the readers, the viewers, the watchers, also welcome to give a die, all 5 of you, if you want. Grapefry loved Story Genius, so make of that what you want, Grape. I don't know, but I also feel like you're.
Do we have time? Do you want to read our before and after excerpts?
Yes, I don't have one because I had no time, but you for sure are welcome, Laura. Do you want to share it up on screen?
Sure. Share screen.
I asked if anyone wanted to do some homework, so write a bit and then use this book to revise it. I have revised earlier using a lot of the things from this book, but not my current novel.
I have a short example I can use after, but it's not so much that I actively used the book on purpose to try and revise this. It's just, as I said, I was in the process of revising / rewriting some bits of The Art of Summoning Demons. So I have almost like a bit of before and after that sort of fits in that. If that makes sense.
Exactly. Like I didn't go through and be like, okay, I'm going to use this technique. This is just cumulative what I took away.
Okay.
So this is the first page of my prologue from 2019, from May. So this is my YA sci-fi. My feet pound against the soil cut with sand under the mother-of-pearl shell expanse of our village. Dad jogs ahead faster than I can keep up, even though he is carrying Mom. He pauses as she goes into a coughing fit, the lumps on her neck standing out even more from the strain in her muscles. It sounds like her soul is trying to escape. Her breath stutters for a few moments. Many people have the same sickness, outsider's plague. 10 minutes ago, Dad snuck her out of the quarantine at the clinic. Finally, I catch up. With his free hand, he grabs my arm and pulls me almost painfully while we run together through the outer spirals of the giant sea snail shell we call home, the Nautilus. Villagers give us a wide berth and glare at us. My 6-year-old mind tumbles in confusion. Why do they hate us so much? Dad looks straight ahead as we cross over into the high-tech sanitation flooring and fly through the agricultural spiral where we have spent almost every day in. Mom taught me about the different plants and what they were used for here. Dad and I made mud pies while preparing the ground for planting when I was too young for school. We climbed trees during harvest, and Mom wove fronds into animals after husking. Flower crowns and berry sneaking in the spring. Quiet laughter. There is no time now. The only sounds are our imported cotton skirts snapping against our knees and our labor breathing. Where are we going, Dad? I ask. So that was 2019.
First of all, taking a patient out of quarantine, absolutely heinous crime. Absolutely heinous crime. Cannot stand this, Dad. I am so sorry. But do continue, Laura.
And also, second of all, this is what I aspire to get to. So let's see what the step after is.
Okay. So here's my rewrite. It's not perfect at all, but here we go. My lungs burn as I run on the cool soil and sand, the soft ground trying to swallow my bare feet with each quick step. Above, the shiny mother-of-pearl shell ceiling curves, the spiral showing us the direction to the opening of the Nautilus, the ginormous shell we share with the kind sea snail. The exit leads to the forbidden outside world of the planet Atua, where non-humans live. Faster, Nadia, yells Dad, running ahead of me. His back is big and strong. I wish I could ride on his shoulders, instead of having to try and keep up as we escape. He shifts Mom in his arms, her tangled, long, dark hair falling past his hips to brush against his lava skirt. Mom wheezes painfully. It sounds like her soul is trying to escape. From this angle, I can't see the lumps on her neck, but I know they're still there, squishy, dark, and hot. Healer Mamea hadn't been able to heal her after all these weeks. She hadn't been able to cure the others either. Outsiders plague, the village whispers when I'm hiding out of sight, trying to listen in from behind woven frond walls. As I run, my cotton skirt snapping around my knees, the hateful glares of the other villagers make my skin prickle. In all my 6 years, Auntie Tuiola Sega has never looked at me like this before, with eyebrows scrunched low and mouth a tight frown so deep it's in shadow. Are we doing something wrong? Dad! Keep running straight, Nadia. The sandy soil ends as we barrel into the agricultural part of the spiral. Sanitizing ooze squishes through my toes as we cross the transition zone, keeping the fertile soil safe, optimal for all the beautiful plants. At least, that's what Mom had said. Deep smells of flowers, ripe fruit, and good dirt fill me, giving me more energy despite pulling up memories. Mom teaching me botany, Dad making mud pies, harvesting with the whole village, flower chains, weaving fronds. But that's not today. There is no laughter anymore. Hasn't been for weeks. Are we really leaving, Dad? I call out between sucked-in breaths, the warmer, damp air making my lungs hurt slightly less.
And there you have it.
I love the rewrite. Like, it really is effective in different ways. And it feels more like a 6-year-old mind.
Yeah.
I feel like that's the main improvement that I immediately noticed was like, oh, it feels more like a 6-year-old who's not exactly sure what they're doing and are we doing something wrong gives more that impression than he took her from quarantine, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
For sure. Thank you so much for sharing. And now Marlon.
Oh, shit. Why do you have to go after the good student?
That is your cross to bear in life.
All right. Let me share present, share screen. I'll just share this window. There we go.
Let's see. There you go.
Okay, nice. It's mostly the highlighted passage, but essentially I've punched up together 2 passages. So before they were in different spaces, and now they're in the same space. So I'll just read essentially what conveys the same parts of the story.
Can you make it 125%?
Oh, sorry. And this is not the first chapter. It's like in the middle. It's in like chapter 3 or something. Death is my reward. Olive turned the sentence over in her head repeatedly, trying to figure out why her grandfather's attorney would tell her this. She'd looked it up after Weir left the dorms. Mors mihi lucrum, yet another Latin phrase, meaning death is my reward. And she could sense, and so like there's a passage break, and then the next bit comes in at that time. And she could sense the envelope in her bag at her feet, her fingers itching to open it, her mind pondering on its contents. Did Gregor leave her money? Then why wouldn't he leave it to Grace and Helen instead? Was it some sob-story letter explaining why he had been absent from every single family Christmas and how he wished to make amends now that he was on his deathbed? No, that couldn't be it. She'd barely known him, but from just the few times she'd interacted with him in that dreadful hospital room in London, she'd gleaned glimpses of who he was in his prime. He wasn't that kind of person. Olive still remembered the only time she'd been alone with her grandfather. She'd been staring at the thin line tattoos creeping up his arms, disappearing below the sleeves of his blue hospital gown. She couldn't help it. So this is sort of the passage that I've rewritten in a different spot. So it starts with the death is my reward, which is why I've re-put that one in, just because it made more sense in the new version. So the new version was, death is my reward. Olive turned the sentence in her head, her fingers turning the envelope in her hands. She'd Googled the Latin expression as soon as the attorney had left Fran's room, but it left her with more questions than answers. Morse made look room. Why would he tell her this? Now she was back in the ugly red chair he'd occupied just minutes earlier, debating whether she should open the brown envelope Gregor had left her. Some part of her resented the old man. He'd never been in her life before the summer, and he'd left as soon as he'd entered it, like a draft coming in and leaving through open windows. Olive's 19th birthday had gone unnoticed in the sterile hospital room, Grace preoccupied with balancing her daily work away from the office and talking to doctors about Gregor's end-of-life care. Aunt Helen had been nowhere in sight until the very last days, when Gregor had been too weak to talk, his voice hoarse and his eyelids heavy. Overall, Gregor had offered nothing to Olive but a traumatic, depressing summer in London, and cryptic words she still struggled to untangle now. She didn't want to like him, as childish as it made her sound. Yet another part of her, the part she knew would win, had been widely intrigued by the old man. Beyond the wrinkled and stained skin, the thick, unkempt grey beard that sprouted from his chin, and the low rasp of his breath, there was a soul she regretted never fully knowing, someone who must have led such a fascinating life, with the myriad of geometric tattoos snaking down his arms all the way to his knuckles. And past the mourning, the guilt, the fear she experienced from both her grandfather's death and now her roommate, Olive wanted answers. What was the link between the two? Why were the same symbols popping up everywhere, chasing her down the labyrinth of her dreams?
Very cleaner than the first draft, I must say.
Thank you. I'm much happier with this version.
As you should be. Let's see. Mine is a bit shorter, but I reckon that's fine. This is the first draft of my Egyptian short story, like the Egyptian Peeves thingamajig, that I actually wrote for a competition that Sacha Black had, where she collected short stories for this villain book she published. So this is my contribution to that. And I used a lot, because I read this book when I wrote this a few years ago, and then I applied it. But this is the first draft. It's astonishing, isn't it? Ethan said, and shone a light on the severed hand. It's creepy, Will ascertained. Oh, come on, Creasy. This hand is 3 millennia old, yet here it sits on display for the world to see. Simply astonishing. The lights reflected in the glass casing and twinkled in Ethan's eyes. Will turned away from the twinkling eyes and the mummified hand and looked around the main hall. They were standing in one of the side galleries. Glass display cases and tables with exhibitions on them lined the side wall, and through the railing and pillars on the right side, the central room stood below them. It was built down in the ground, with a big skylight stretching from the front of the room to the back. Moonlight was seeping in, casting shadows on the ancient statues and tablets on display. Let's go. I don't want to spend a minute longer than I have to in this mausoleum. Will started walking down the gallery to the front of the room. So that's the OG one. A lot of telling, not a whole lot of showing. And this is the updated version. Marvelous, isn't it? Ethan whispered. I hate it, Will whispered back, staring at the mummified hand. Oh, come on, Creasy. This hand is several millenniums old, yet here it sits for us to study. It's a miracle. I guess I just prefer the company of the living. The dead are too quiet for me. Oh, see, that's where you're wrong. The dead speak plenty, just not in words. They speak through coins and treasure, through rituals, clothing, and possession. Ethan mused and put an arm around Will's shoulder. You just need to learn the language. If you say so, Professor, Will said with nervous laughter and tore loose from Ethan's grip. He stared down the central hall of the Museum of Egyptian Antiquities. Starshine fell through the skylight and illuminated the room. It looked eerily different at night. Will headed down the balcony that wrapped around the hall, supported by arches and pillars running along the edge. Against the wall, cabinets and glass display cases featured thousands of years of Egyptian treasures. The hall was as quiet as the grave. In many ways, it was a grave, just not a dusty and forgotten one. It was a curated tomb.
Ooh, I really love the last bit about comparing it to a grave. That's really lovely. It's a nice metaphor for it.
And I feel like I managed to put a lot more character into the rewrite than in the first one.
In the
Even
dialogue,
just
yeah,
the-
for sure.
Yeah, even in the dialogue of like Professor is already so much sassier.
Yeah. So that's how I did my upgrade.
Nice.
And that's what we have for today's show. I think this might be the longest one we've done so far. Almost 3 hours. But thank you so much to my two favorite gals. One of them, or two of them actually, two favorite gals on the planet, Laura and Malin. Got anything you want to promote? Anything you want to shout out? Anything you're doing that you want drawn attention to?
I have nothing because I am too busy to have anything at the moment. But I'll post a video soon, I promise.
I have downloaded the clips. I just need to edit the next vlog, which is doing a writing routine created me by Sky Winter's books. So
Nice.
there
Very
were 3
exciting.
flashes and a short story I had to write in a day. So I read them
No
aloud
biggie.
in it. So, and I
No
did a
biggie.
5K that day walking on the treadmill.
Wow.
And I think probably everyone already follows you, but if they don't, where can they find you?
My channel is called Laura Nettles on YouTube, and on Instagram it's nettles.animation. I don't do much on Instagram. I did post some pictures of food that we've had recently. Like, oh, it was so good. Homemade focaccia bread and a nectarine pie and a strawberry pie and buttermilk pancakes and raspberry rose macarons and just all the good
Oh my
food.
god, please make a macaron like
Timer?
spring. Yes, timer. Please.
Macaron timer, that would slay.
That's for the Frenchie.
Though I hate macarons. But...
I like the salted caramel ones best. But some macarons I don't love at all. So yeah.
My favorite ones are the lemon poppy seed ones.
Ooh.
And where can people find you, Malin? If they want to, if they are so inclined.
Think ? That on YouTube, Instagram, and TikTok, I'm at Melon Tries. If I'm wrong, sorry. You might find someone else. Good luck.
I mean, I should have linked you below, but I didn't. I think there's like no caption at all. My name is Stig. You can find me here on my channel. Stig Dyrdahl, Stig Writer, something along those lines. Today we've been talking about Anatomy of Prose by Sacha Black. We've all been raving about it, really. 5, 5, 5, 6. That's a good rating for a book on this channel because we've not always been this fond.
Because we're little bitches, so
We're little bitches. So I think Laura really brought out the best in us. Thanks to anyone watching. There's going to be a new craft stream next month on the last Tuesday of the month. Don't know what the book is. I haven't chosen it yet. If you have any suggestions, let me know. If there's anything you want me to read, let me know. If there's anything my lovely co-hosts want me to read, you're more than welcome to join. As always, this is a conglomerate, not really a solo show.
Do you want a horror writing craft book?
That's actually fitting because I am writing a Weird West End horror, so that would be very...
Writing
would
in the Dark
love-
by Tim Wagner. Chef's kiss.
Writing in the... I think Sacha Black shouts out that book in her acknowledgements. That's one of the things with this book. It had a lot of links in print, which I think is ridiculous.
How many pages is it? This is my
It's like a
question.
square, but it's like this thick. So
Why
Tim
is it a
Horton, was that
square?
it? No.
The designer in me hates this. But how many
Writing in
pages?
the Dark
yeah,
or
but
Writing Tips with Tim Wagner. Okay.
Oh, he's got a workbook as well. That's interesting.
Okay. Well, if you want to do that for August, then call in, any of you.
236 pages.
Doable. But yeah, thanks so much for watching. Thank you everyone in chat who's been engaging. It's been really, really fun. I think this is one of the favorite things I do on the internet, except for trouble streams, is talk about craft books with some of my besties. Yeah, I'll be here next Tuesday for just a regular writing sprint. Yeah, let's commit to that now. I need it. I'll be here next Tuesday with a regular writing sprint and every Tuesday for the rest of the month. And that's probably it, folks. So, toodaloo.
Bye.
Bye.